pact. There will also be cutting of tariffs on luxury cars and boosting security, maritime and counter-terror cooperation. As India and the EU are all set to seal a landmark free trade agreement asserting strategic autonomy, the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent criticizes Europe's continued trade with India over Russian oil. The Madras High Court is all set to announce its verdict today on Thalapathy Vijay's highly anticipated film, Jananayagan, his final film, and that, of course, is keeping scores of his fans on the edge. A war of words erupts within the India bloc as Congress MPs and DMK MLA clash over power-sharing demands. Manikam Tagore has been countering threats by staking claim to Madurai North. As massive nationwide protests erupt against UGC's caste equity rules, with general category students demanding a rollback of this new notification. They're planning demonstrations outside the UGC office amidst a 118% surge in complaints. The BJP calls Rahul Gandhi's refusal to wear the Assamese gamosa at the president's at-home reception insensitive and insulting to the Northeast. Congress rejects the claim, claiming that it is misrepresentation and simply political drama. The debate over the entry of non-Hindus into Badrinath and Kedarnath, the temple committee calls shrines sacred, not tourist sites. Chief Minister Dhami promises inclusive management, while opposition claims that the move spreads hatred. The BCCI slams Pakistan for provoking Bangladesh in the ICC T20 World Cup controversy, calls the boycott threat unwarranted and accuses them of intervening without any reason. Mumbai Metro authorities school actor Varun Dhawan for doing pull-ups inside a metro coach, say hang out but don't hang there. They stress that these stunts are unsafe and can be punishable by law. So amid the global trade disruptions triggered by the US tariffs, India and the European Union are all set to sign a landmark free trade agreement hailed as the mother of all deals by the EU chief Ursula von der Leyen. The historic pact is expected to boost bilateral trade, investment and supply chain resilience. It will also benefit the biggest market in the world, creating a combined market of over 2 billion people. Under the agreement, several Indian goods, including textiles, chemicals, gems and jewelry, footwear, electrical machinery, leather, are all likely to get duty-free access into the European Union. It's a market of 600 million people. Sectors like pharmaceuticals, IT and manufacturing could also see a major export boost. But the partnership goes beyond just trade. India and the EU are all set to sign a security and defense partnership focusing on maritime security, cyber defense, counterterrorism and intelligence sharing, and it will have a particular focus on the Indo-Pacific. This historic free trade agreement is not just about economics, it also signals a new era of strategic cooperation, positioning India as a trusted partner of the European Union. And it comes at a time of increasing trade protectionism, Donald Trump's tariffs. So what does this really mean? Remember, India and the EU currently are the largest trading bloc as far as India is concerned. India-EU trade in the year 24-25 was $136 billion. That's much more than India-US trade. This is India's largest goods trading partner. Europe, the bloc of 27 countries, the biggest market for India. In fact, 17% of India's total exports are to the European Union. It's comparable to India's exports to America, which are around 17-18%. For Europe, 9% of India's total imports are from the European Union. So combined, $135 billion, which is the biggest trading relationship that India has with any country or bloc of countries, which is why this is being touted as the mother of all trade deals. So why is this important, and what sort of signal does this send, particularly to the United States when Trump is amping up on tariffs? Reason one, it diversifies India's supply chains. It reduces the massive reliance that India has over US as well as China, US for its market and China for its supply chain. So this is going to be something that is critical. It'll send out a huge signal. The second big reason is It's a huge bloc. It's a bloc of 27 countries. It's the largest bloc of nations. India will get access to all 27 countries with this one deal, unlike, of course, bilateral FTAs, which India has already signed with countries like the UK, New Zealand, etc. The third big reason, it's a symbolic boost coming as it does at a time when India's ties with America are fraught. Delhi is emerging as a strategic choice for big markets, big trading partners like Europe in this instance. It will also lead to major job creation. In India itself, it is expected to create anywhere between 8 to 10 million jobs. In Europe, it is expected to create anywhere between 1 to 2 million jobs. The fifth reason, this is India's 9th FTA in the last 4 years. There's been a definitive acceleration of India trying to tie up free trade agreements with UK, with New Zealand, with the UAE. All of this has happened in the post-COVID era, and this reflects very aggressive trade diplomacy. And sixth reason, it also gives access to the EU markets. Remember, it's a 600 million strong market. It is twice the size of the American market. Therefore, it will be a big boost to Indian exports, investment, and tech inflows as well. And reason seven, it's a gateway to deeper cooperation in technology, in climate, and in defense. Now, remember, let me go across now to our colleagues, Siddhant Mishra, who's joining us from Hyderabad House, where they will be meeting very soon the Prime Minister and Ursula von der Leyen. Akanksha Swaroop is also joining us live from there. So this is the 16th India-EU summit. Siddhant, obviously the big focus is on the announcement of the conclusion of the FTA between India and the European Union. You were also there when we spoke to Antonio Costa last night. Why is this such a big deal? Why is it being touted as the mother of all deals?
In fact, in your interview yesterday, EU Council President made it very clear that there's going to be three big takeaways from his visit to India. One is the announcement of the conclusion of talks on the trade agreement. The second is the defense and securities partnership. And the third is the agreement on mobility. Now, FTA, we all have been talking about it, how it will be creating market for 2 billion people. There's going to be free flow of trade, etc., etc. But what really excites me, Zaka, is that both countries are signing defense and securities partnership pact. Because, traditional view in Europe has always been that India is close to Russia, and perhaps this was the hesitation with many European countries. But under Prime Minister Modi's leadership, in last 1 decade, Zaka, things have changed. India buys plane from France. We are looking at co-manufacturing submarines with Germany. So other than France and Germany, after this particular agreement between Europe and India, perhaps we could see more Indian and European companies coming together for co-production, for technology transfer, etc., etc. So that traditional view has now got changed when it comes to the European bloc, and I find it really significant, Zaka. And the second is the mobility agreement, because Indian side has always been asking for more opportunities for the Indian talent in Europe, United States, and in various other countries. So now what will be the details of that agreement? We really don't know. But if this happens, and in fact the other day I attended the briefing from the Brussels, and in fact they made it very clear that more visas will be given to young skilled Indian professionals, researchers, students, etc. So that is also going to be very significant, given this entire atmosphere around the immigration issue in Europe, etc., etc. Despite that, Europe signing mobility agreement with India is huge.
Okay, I also want to get a word in from Akanksha. I mean, obviously everyone's touting this as the mother of all deals. That's what Ursula von der Leyen said at Davos last week. Aside of the size of this free trade agreement, it will also send a signal to Washington at a time when Trump is doubling down on tariffs. He's in fact gone back on his word. Just look at what he's announced vis-a-vis South Korea just yesterday, saying he's increasing the tariffs because he doesn't like the fact that the South Korean parliament has not ratified it. India is yet to conclude its FTA with the US. What signal does it send to Washington that India and the EU will be announcing the mother of all deals today?
Absolutely, Zaka. And this FTA is happening at a time when, like they say, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. So after 19 years since those negotiations began, this FTA is being forged. And how it's ruffling the feathers is very evident as far as Washington is concerned, because you look at the messaging that's coming in from the Treasury Secretary, Secretary Bessent, who's already sent out that reaction, which is almost passé in terms of rhetoric, when he's again gone on to harp on the fact as far as India's purchases of Russian crude is concerned. It's rather shocking that he has to make such a comment. This when India has already started phasing out, and in fact our purchase of Russian oil is at its lowest. It's certainly not bothering the EU, because we are all set to forge that mother of all deals, as you rightly highlighted. It's going to be a historic deal. Why so? Washington is clearly rattled, because what EU is going to offer to India is something that US is not able to. Our MSMEs, our farmers remain our top priority, and that is why experts have already highlighted how India's agrarian sector need not be rattled by this deal, as has not been the case with the United States. US is looking towards dumping their own US produce in Indian markets, whether it is corn or soybean. But that is not the expectation when it comes to EU products. India is rather looking towards expanding its imports into that 27-member trading bloc that EU is. So you can expect a boost to Indian farmers, particularly seafood traders, all of which had borne the brunt of Trump's tariffs, whether it came to shrimp, prawn, even cuttlefish. Remember, states like Andhra Pradesh and Telangana were bearing the brunt of it in India. So you can expect that boost over here, especially when it comes to our produce like beverages, tea, coffee, fruit and vegetables. All of those products will now find a market in EU.
Okay, we'll come back to both you, Akanksha, and Siddhant as we get pictures. The first pictures that you'll get are, of course, from the Rajghat, where both Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa, the European Commissioner and Council Presidents, respectively, will be going to pay their respects to the father of the nation, after which, at about noon, is what we are given to understand, they will come to the Hyderabad House, where there will be both the delegation-level talks and the restricted talks. So we'll come back to you as and when we get those pictures. But I want to play out what Scott Bessent has been saying, and this is a bit of a familiar tune coming in from a Trump administration official. Here in India, it's almost beginning to sound like a broken record, saying that India has been facilitating the Russian war in Ukraine by buying Russian oil. So Europe is sort of creating a war onto itself. That's the phrase that Scott Bessent has used. This was in a weekend interview to ABC News Network. Let's play that out, and I'll try and parse why this is particularly A, an inaccuracy, and B, this is just a political spin that's been put out by the Trump administration. Let's just play that out, and then we'll open this up to our guests.
That he has worked to negotiate a settlement on Russia, Ukraine. The U.S. has made much bigger sacrifices than the Europeans have. We have put 25% tariffs on India for buying Russian oil. Guess what happened last week? The Europeans signed a trade deal with India. And just to be clear again, the Russian oil goes into India, the refined products come out, and the Europeans buy the refined products. They are financing the war against themselves. So President Trump's leadership, we will eventually end this Ukraine-Russia war.
Mischaracterized it as the Europeans are doing a war unto themselves, but that's a mischaracterization. In any case, the Europeans don't seem to mind that issue in forging ahead with the India-EU FTA conclusion, which will, of course, as everyone's been saying, be touted as the mother of all deals. Mujeeb Puri is former diplomat. He's joining us. Ajay Srivastav is the founder of the Global Trade Research Initiative, GTRI. Major General retired Sanjay Meston is a defense expert. There's a big defense and security partnership agreement that will also be signed today. And Tatiana Kukreva is a senior Russian journalist who's joining us live from Moscow. Let me start with you, Mr. Puri. The fact that this deal is happening and negotiations have been going on for almost 2 decades now, on again, off again. I think they were suspended in 2013, again revived after 2022, post-COVID. realizing, A, you need resilient supply chains. You can't be dependent on China so much. And now, increasingly in the last 1 year, because of the Trump tariffs and how it's upended the global trading order, there's suddenly an urgency both for Europe and for India in sort of forging ahead with this deal. How will this be viewed? How will this be viewed in Washington, in Beijing, and perhaps even in Moscow?
Raka, thank you very much for having me here. Look, let me make one or two simple points to start with. The European Union is India's largest trading partner in goods. And even though people say that we are the ninth largest trading partner of the European Union, if you leave out their traditional trading partners like the United States, now Britain, and countries like that, we are among the top three trading partners. So this is a deal which signals openness between both the economies, two very large economies, the world's second largest economy and the fourth and fifth largest economy, India. So a huge market that opens up on both sides. Both have been mindful of political realities, the Indian agriculture sector, all very good. Other than that, what does it signal? It signals to the huge technological and financial capacities of Europe to invest in India, which is something which is particularly important for us as we pursue a $5 trillion economy. And thirdly, it signals that all major players in the world are looking at multi-alignment. It's not just transatlantic. And so you were very good when you pointed out to the familiar cassette being played from the other side. But the fact of the matter is, multi-alignment is something which is good for both, good for India, good for the European Union, and I'm glad the two sides have come together. Thank you very much from across the Atlantic. What else can one say?
Let me also get Mr. Ajay Srivastav into this. For the last year, so much focus has been on India and the US and the bilateral trade arrangement not happening, what the differences are, agri, dairy, and then, of course, Mr. Trump introducing a whole new variable around Russian oil. But the people who have the most stake in this is Europe and India, have gone ahead and pushed through this deal. I believe there were 24 chapters which had to be concluded. They've concluded more than 20. 2 or 3 chapters, according to the Commerce Secretary, will be subsumed. And today they will announce the conclusion of the negotiations on the FTA. And then, of course, it will go for legal scrubbing. Tell us how and why this is important, and what sort of signal does it send to Mr. Donald Trump and his emissaries?
First, we have to understand the deal is not against the US. It's not an alignment against the US. The two sides are coming together and ensuring against the trade disruptions caused largely by him and somewhat against China. So basically, we are trying to cut dependence on few countries like US or China and coming together, creating new supply chains. That's number one. Number two is we already have a big trade base. So merchandise trade is about $136 billion, as you rightly said. But total trade, that means merchandise plus services exceeds $190 billion. We have a strong base. And India is a high tariff country. EU also imposes tariffs on many of our big products like garments or leather, footwear, etc. When these tariffs come down, then this base will increase substantially from $190 billion to higher up once the agreement is implemented.
I think the target that they've given by the end of the decade is closer to 500 billion. Whether or not they'll reach there, we will wait and see. But I think it also signals, and you will see this later on when the announcement is made, that they've taken a wise decision, both sides, to try and keep agriculture out, because that's a sensitive topic. Certainly here in India, there's a massive farmers' constituency, and even in Europe, in places like France and Germany, the farmer bloc is very, very powerful. So they've taken the call to try and keep agriculture out. So that's a good thing, I think, and you will get to know it formally when the announcement is made, when the joint statement is read out by both parties after the talks conclude today. I also want to play out. I caught up with Antonio Costa. He's the European Council president. He's one of the two individuals who will be meeting the Prime Minister today, who will be leading the India-EU summit. And I asked him to put into context for our viewers why this, what is being touted as the mother of all deals, why is this such a huge thing, and why it's important for both sides to have pushed through these negotiations and got to this conclusion agreement, which they will announce today. I want to play a small excerpt from that interview, and then I'll go across to Mr. Meston and also to Tatiana. The India-EU FTA is expected to be concluded and signed. What can you tell us about that?
Well, first of all, we are crossing fingers to conclude the negotiations of the FTA. It will be very important, both for EU and India. It will be the largest free trade agreement in the world. 2 billion people is the largest trade agreement ever signed by India or the European Union. Then I hope that today we achieve to conclude in the proper way this agreement. On the other side, we have other agreements. One very important on security and defense, and the third one on mobility. These, I think, there are three big achievements from this summit.
So it comes at a time when there's a lot of trade protectionism, tariffs are being used almost like a weapon. Tomorrow when you sign the agreement, the FTA, what signal does it send to global capitals around the world?
I think it's a very strong and important message to the world. That means that EU and India believes more on the trade agreements than to tariffs. Then we believe that free trade boosts economy, create jobs, and promote prosperity. And this is what we want, to have shared prosperity. And that's why this agreement comes in the most important moment, perhaps. Comes later, but in the right moment, because now more than ever it's important to show how it's important. The European Union is now engaged around the world. We have already 78 trade agreements, and we are increasing our efforts to conclude new trade agreements. Last week, we signed with the Mercosur, a very important trade agreement, and we have already signed with Mexico, with Indonesia, and we continue to negotiate with different countries like Thailand, Emirates, United Arabs, then a lot of.
But particularly with India, because it's such a huge market, 1 billion people. Again, what is it that you hope the world takes away from this free trade agreement?
First, this trade agreement is very important to boost our economies, but it's also a very important geopolitical stabilizer, because now the world is challenging by protectionism, by the rise of tariffs, and then it's important to give to the world this message that these two largest economies, these two largest democracies in the world, we are upholding the rules-based trade order.
We're upholding the rules-based trade order. It's a global stabilizer. That's how the EU Council President described this India-EU FTA. I want to get Mr. Meston also into this conversation. Major General, the second agreement that will be signed today and announced today is the India-EU Defence Partnership Agreement. And there is a lot of focus at a time when it seems like the world is getting split up into spheres of influence, the American sphere, the Chinese sphere, the Russian sphere of influence, etc. What does such an announcement of a defense and security partnership mean for India, mean for Indo-Pacific? We have some genuine security concerns around this part of the world. Can we count on Europe for support, whether it is military or logistical support, in case some actors decide to unilaterally change the status quo?
Zaka, good morning. Very pertinent issues raised by you. I think after hearing the interview of Mr. Antonio, things are very, very clear that today, more than India, it is Europe Union which requires India. And why? Now, why is, firstly, they have realized our economic power. We are now going to be the third largest economy, and also the defense power, military power, they have seen it. And it was shown very well during Op Sindoor, and that has been the turning point. And I think yesterday the display of military equipment, and most of it was indigenous Atmanirbhar Bharat. And we were watching the clippings as to Ursula and Antonio. They were keeping the Prime Minister constantly engaged and pointing at the military equipment. So they have realized that India has today the wherewithal to produce very good military equipment. And therefore, I foresee the following things is likely to happen. One is also, we are a great nation in terms of we have had large number of experience or a varied experience in fighting counter-terrorism and counter-experience. So because of that, Also, they have realized that intelligence sharing, counter-terrorism, etc., India has got lots and lots of experience. So therefore, now how does it manifest? Number one, I would say that the private sectors in India, private defense sectors,
Yeah.
they are going to get a boost. I think I see TOT and maybe even co-production happening between India and EU. Now, why? Again, today, Europe is that country, a good word was used by Mr. Antonio, protectionism. They were actually under the American protectionism, and therefore their defense budgets were just about 1 to 1.2 of the GDP, percent of the GDP. Today, now they are pitching at 5% of the GDP. And therefore, they require that if they have to acquire military hardware, military equipment, India is the best place. So it has to be joint collaboration, co-production. And they realize that India, the production is cheaper. And yes, there is one caution which we have to keep in mind is the quality of product. And I foresee that in the near future, India perhaps will be exporting a lot of military hardware to Europe and vice versa. Even we will have co-production, and you are aware that about 114 Rafale deal, which we are now just going to sign it. I think we are looking for joint production and TOT in terms of at least 80% of joint production and TOT in India.
You know, the Rafales are already sort of, it's a big defense deal as far as India is concerned. I want to show our viewers what this exactly means, because the India-EU Defense Pact, coming as it does at a time when there are heightened tensions. You've seen just last week all the noise surrounding Greenland and territorial integrity and sovereignty. So the India-EU Defense Pact is very, very critical. It sends out a signal that both India and the EU, and you can call them middle powers if you want, they are reaffirming their strategic alignment at a time when Trump is sort of dividing up the world into spheres of influence, Western Hemisphere, Eastern Hemisphere, etc. It's also the annual India-EU dialogue on defense and security cooperation, particularly when it comes to maritime security, when it comes to counterterrorism, because in this part of the world where China is rising, it's becoming almost a hegemonic power, trying to rewrite the rules of business in the Indo-Pacific, India needs to send out a strong, stable signal that it has got middle powers backing it as well. Indian firms will participate in the EU Security Action Programme. India and EU will also launch talks for security of information deal, which again is part of what General Meston was talking about, intelligence sharing, real-time satellite information, etc. So I think that is very critical as well. And I want to go across to Tatiana Kukreva on this. Tatiana, I asked Mr. Costa yesterday, both on what Mr. Trump said about Greenland and, of course, the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war for the last 4 years. He says the principle is the same. It's enshrined in the UN Charter. It's about territorial integrity and sovereignty. And if the big powers think those rules don't apply to them, whether for the US and Greenland or for Russia and Ukraine, then it's time for middle powers like India and EU, Canada, etc., to come together and say that we are upholding the rules-based order.
Good morning, Zaka, and thank you for having me. Well, I believe that Mr. Costa's positioning is quite, it's a comfortable one here. But first of all, I wouldn't put EU and India into the same basket, at least economically. That's quite an understatement, because of course in this deal, the Indian consumers market, that Indian consumers are driving a massive market and aiming to be the third consuming market by 2027. It's a huge deal for the EU to be able to trade to that market. When it comes to big powers kind of trying to rethink what sovereignty means. It's all good when we are continuing to demonize Donald Trump because he weaponized the tariffs and he's put the EU in quite an uncomfortable position. But it wasn't much of a change with the previous American administration. They were still very much acting upon their own, understanding of sovereignty, of where do they meddle. Let's not forget that it was France that was driving that was at the front of an operation in Libya, which essentially ended in a destruction of a state. Where were we when we were talking about sovereignty at that point? So it's of course massively debatable whether it is about so to speak, big players redefining sovereignty. But also, I mean, come on, India is a huge player. It's a huge player. It is a massive force on the geopolitical scene as much as the economic one. So yes, it is a good position, but I would argue that the EU needs this deal right now, specifically with Donald Trump weaponizing trade so much.
But Russia has also
And
been dragged into this, not just because of the Russia-Ukraine war, and we can go on and on about Europe's position and its double standards and so on. But the Americans have also drawn this whole business of India purchasing Russian oil. That's why the 25% tariffs have been imposed on India. Scott Bessent has made that, again, ad nauseum almost, saying that, we put sanctions on India for the Russian oil and they've reduced purchase of Russian oil. Would you want to play that again? This is what he said to ABC this week, just on Sunday, on Sunday morning television. Again, it's a false narrative, you reckon? They're trying to, again, change the goalposts?
well, we've discussed this at length or many times. The whole issue with India supposedly buying Russian oil is not exactly about India buying Russian oil. It's about India not buying more American oil, and now the U.S. has a lot of it to sell. And whether we can debate, how much of it is actually American, there is a huge chunk of the market that is now under the US control. And of course, again, it's a very American playbook, to create a villain and then to use that villain in order to facilitate trade deals, anything, basically. So, and Russia is and has been a very comfortable villain for the US for many years. It's not just this administration, again, of course, Russia has been dragged into this. But I believe that in situations like these, we have a responsibility to look deeper than the surface of what is being said.
Okay, just give me a moment. I want to bring our viewers up to speed. I mean, everybody's talking about this as the mother of all trade deals. Our guests have also pointed out to the fact that, of course, the EU and India form, at least as far as India is concerned, the largest trading bloc. Now, what is it that India exports to the European Union, and what is it that the European Union exports to India? Let's try and break that down for you. So, India-EU trade, if you were to break it down as to what are the major exports as far as India is concerned. India exports about $15 billion of petroleum products. And I think that is absolutely critical because this whole thing has been touted as, India is buying Russian oil and therefore enabling the war in Ukraine, etc. $11 billion is electronics. So that's again a huge component of exports that go into Europe. About $5 billion is organic chemicals. Again, a shade under $5 billion is processed iron and steel that is exported to Europe. $4 billion of garments and textiles, because that is a huge chunk in a very labor-intensive sector, and that has been hit because of the Trump tariffs. So if it goes down to zero across the European trading bloc, that would be a huge win for small garment and textile exporters. $3 billion pharma products, again, under the impact of the Trump tariffs. $2.5 billion gems and jewelry in places like Surat, etc., which have been badly hit. This will, of course, send out a huge signal that, yes, India and Europe mean business. Europe is a huge trading market as far as India is concerned, and therefore, India is pushing this FTA. Also, what does India import from the European Union? About $13 billion is industrial machinery, and a lot has been talked about this, whether it is for heavy industry, whether it is for the automobile sector. $9 billion of electronics, whether it is television sets, consumer durables, smartphones. These are all being imported as part of the $9 billion import from Europe. $6 billion is aircraft alone, whether it is commercial aircraft like Airbus or even defense aircraft. General Meston talked about the Rafales. About $3.5 billion are medical devices, And then there are mobile phone parts that have also been imported to the tune of a little over $3 billion. Let's go across to Prime Minister Modi. He's speaking on the India Energy Week just ahead of the India-EU FTA being signed.
कल ही भारत और यूरोपियन यूनियन के बीच एक बहुत बड़ा एग्रीमेंट हुआ है। दुनिया में लोग इसकी चर्चा मदर ऑफ ऑल डील्स के रूप में कर रहे हैं। ये समझौता भारत के 140 करोड़ लोगों और यूरोपीय देशों के करोड़ों लोगों के लिए बहुत बड़े अवसर लेकर आया है। ये दुनिया की दो बड़ी इकोनॉमीज के बीच तालमेल का एक शानदार उदाहरण बना है। ये समझौता ग्लोबल जीडीपी के करीब 25% और ग्लोबल ट्रेड के करीब 1/3 हिस्से को रिप्रेजेंट करता है। ये समझौता ट्रेड के साथ साथ डेमोक्रेसी और रूल ऑफ लॉ के प्रति हमारे शेयर्ड कमिटमेंट को भी सशक्त करता है। साथियों, ईयू के साथ हुआ ये फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट ब्रिटेन और एप्टा समझौतों को भी कॉम्प्लीमेंट करेगा। इससे ट्रेड और ग्लोबल सप्लाई चेन दोनों को मजबूती मिलेगी। मैं भारत के नौजवानों को, सभी देशवासियों को इसके लिए बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। मैं टेक्सटाइल, जेम्स एंड ज्वेलरी, लेदर एंड शूज ऐसे हर सेक्टर से जुड़े साथियों को भी बधाई देता हूं। ये समझौता आपके लिए बहुत सहायक सिद्ध होगा। साथियों, इस ट्रेड डील से भारत में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग को तो बल मिलेगा ही, साथ ही सर्विसेज से जुड़े सेक्टर का भी और अधिक विस्तार होगा। ये फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट दुनिया के हर बिजनेस, हर इन्वेस्टर के लिए भारत पर कॉन्फिडेंस को और मजबूत करेगा। साथियों, भारत आज हर सेक्टर में ग्लोबल पार्टनरशिप पर बहुत अधिक काम कर रहा है। मैं अगर एनर्जी सेक्टर की ही चर्चा करूं तो यहां एनर्जी वैल्यू चेन से जुड़े हुए अलग अलग क्षेत्रों में निवेश की बहुत संभावनाएं हैं। आप एक्सप्लोरेशन का ही क्षेत्र ले लीजिए। भारत ने अपने एक्सप्लोरेशन सेक्टर को काफी ओपन कर दिया है। आपको हमारे डीप सी एक्सप्लोरेशन से जुड़े समुद्र मंथन मिशन की भी जानकारी है। हम इस दशक के अंत तक अपने ऑयल एंड गैस सेक्टर में इन्वेस्टमेंट को $100 बिलियन तक ले जाने का प्रयास कर रहे हैं। हमारा लक्ष्य एक्सप्लोरेशन के दायरे को भी 1 मिलियन स्क्वायर किलोमीटर तक विस्तार करने का है। इसी सोच के साथ हमारे यहां 170 से अधिक ब्लॉक्स को अवार्ड किया जा चुका है। अंडमान निकोबार का बेसिन भी हमारी नेक्स्ट हाइड्रोकार्बन होप बन रहा है। साथियों, हमने एक्सप्लोरेशन सेक्टर में काफी रिफॉर्म्स भी किए हैं। नो गो एरिया बहुत कम कर दिया गया है। इंडिया एनर्जी वीक के पिछले एडिशंस में आपको भी जो भी सुझाव थे, आपने जो कुछ भी कहा, उनके अनुसार हमने अपने एक्ट्स और रूल्स में भी बदलाव किए हैं। यदि आप एक्सप्लोरेशन सेक्टर में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं तो आपकी कंपनी की प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी बढ़ना तय है। साथियों, भारत की एक और विशेषता है जो है एनर्जी सेक्टर में इन्वेस्टमेंट को बहुत फायदेमंद बनाता है। हमारे यहां बहुत बड़ी रिफाइनिंग कैपेसिटी मौजूद है। हम रिफाइनिंग कैपेसिटी के मामले में विश्व में दूसरे स्थान पर है। जल्द ही हम दुनिया में पहले नंबर पर होंगे। आज भारत की रिफाइनिंग कैपेसिटी करीब 260 MMTPA की है। इसे 300 MMTPA के ऊपर ले जाने के लिए निरंतर प्रयास हो रहा है। ये इन्वेस्टर्स के लिए बहुत बड़ा एडवांटेज है। साथियों, भारत में एलएनजी की डिमांड भी निरंतर बढ़ रही है। हमने अपनी टोटल एनर्जी डिमांड का 15% एलएनजी से पूरा करने का लक्ष्य रखा है। इसलिए हमें एलएनजी के पूरे वैल्यू चेन पर काम करने की आवश्यकता है। आज भारत ट्रांसपोर्टेशन पर भी बहुत बड़े स्तर पर काम कर रहा है। एलएनजी ट्रांसपोर्टेशन के लिए जिन वेसल्स की जरूरत है, हम उन्हें भारत में ही बनाने पर काम कर रहे हैं। हाल में ही भारत में शिप बिल्डिंग के लिए 70,000 करोड़ रुपए का प्रोग्राम शुरू किया गया है। साथ ही एलएनजी के लिए देश के पोर्ट्स पर टर्मिनल के निर्माण में भी निवेश की अनेक संभावनाएं हैं। रीगैसिफिकेशन से जुड़े प्रोजेक्ट्स में भी आपके लिए इन्वेस्ट करने की बड़ी संभावनाएं बन रही है। साथियों, एलएनजी के ट्रांसपोर्टेशन के लिए भारत में बहुत बड़ी पाइपलाइन की भी अब जरूरत है। बीते सालों में इस पर हमने बहुत निवेश किया है, लेकिन अभी भी बहुत बड़े पैमाने पर इन्वेस्टमेंट के लिए संभावनाएं हैं। आज भारत के कई शहरों में सिटी गैस डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन का नेटवर्क पहुंच चुका है और हम तेजी से अन्य शहरों में भी इससे जोड़ रहे हैं। सिटी गैस डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन भी आपके निवेश के लिए बहुत ही आकर्षक क्षेत्र है। साथियों, भारत की इतनी बड़ी जनसंख्या है, हमारी इकोनॉमी लगातार बढ़ रही है। ऐसे भारत में पेट्रोकेमिकल प्रोडक्ट्स की डिमांड भी लगातार बढ़ने वाली है। इसलिए हमें बहुत बड़े एनर्जी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की आवश्यकता होगी और इसमें भी आपका इन्वेस्टमेंट आपको बहुत ग्रोथ देगा। इन सब के अलावा भारत में डाउनस्ट्रीम एक्टिविटीज में भी आपके लिए इन्वेस्टमेंट के बहुत मौके हैं। साथियों, आज का भारत रिफॉर्म्स एक्सप्रेस पर सवार है और हर सेक्टर में तेजी से रिफॉर्म्स कर रहा है। हम डोमेस्टिक हाइड्रोकार्बन को सशक्त करने के लिए रिफॉर्म्स कर रहे हैं और ग्लोबल कोलैबोरेशन के लिए ट्रांसपेरेंट और इन्वेस्टर फ्रेंडली एनवायरनमेंट बना रहे हैं। भारत अब एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी से आगे बढ़कर एनर्जी इंडिपेंडेंस के मिशन पर काम कर रहा है। भारत एक ऐसा एनर्जी सेक्टर इकोसिस्टम डेवलप कर रहा है जो भारत की लोकल डिमांड को पूरा कर सके और एफोर्डेबल रिफाइनिंग और ट्रांसपोर्टेशन सॉल्यूशन से दुनिया के लिए एक्सपोर्ट भी बहुत ही कॉम्पिटिटिव हो। साथियों, हमारा एनर्जी सेक्टर हमारी एस्पिरेशंस के केंद्र में है। इसमें $500 बिलियन की इन्वेस्टमेंट अपॉर्चुनिटीज है। इसलिए मेरा आह्वान है, मेक इन इंडिया, इनोवेट इन इंडिया, स्केल विथ इंडिया, इन्वेस्ट इन इंडिया। इसी आग्रह के साथ मैं आप सभी को इंडिया एनर्जी वीक की अनेक अनेक शुभकामनाएं देता हूं।
That's Prime Minister Modi inaugurating the India Energy Week, and what he said in the context of the India-EU FTA is significant as well. He said, and I quote, just yesterday, a major agreement was signed between India and the European Union. The agreement has brought on huge opportunity for crores of people, both in India and in Europe. This has become an example of coordination between two of the world's major economies. I congratulate my colleagues associated with the textiles, gems and jewelry sectors. This agreement will be extremely beneficial for you. This trade deal will not only give a boost to manufacturing, but will also greatly benefit the service sector. And he said that people are calling this the mother of all trade deals. I want to go back to our guests. Ambassador Puri is still with us. Mr. Srivastav is still with us. General Meston and Tatiana Kukreva is also with us. Ambassador Puri, so just in and of itself, if you were to view just the India-EU FTA in isolation, forget about what is happening elsewhere in the world and the global trading order being appended, etc. These were negotiations that started in 2007. I think that went on for about 4 or 5 years. Then it was suspended. Then I think it's the post-COVID world, the post-COVID era that made both sides realize that you basically have two things. For supply chains, there is an overdependence on China, and for markets, there is an overdependence on the United States. How much did this post-COVID era, sort of expedite these negotiations? Today, we're reaching at the conclusion of the negotiations on the FTA.
Zaka, you're again very right. Look, there's absolutely no doubt that these negotiations, which went on over 20 years, and I was also part of them for several years, uh, bureaucratic lethargy, both sides pulling their legs up and saying, demanding the ultimate, etc., were there. And therefore, external pushes are always very important. Transatlantic was important. Remember, COVID, the supply chains, China, as you very rightly said, also President Trump. And in the very first term itself, he was putting the ante up on lots of these things. The fact that the European Union, which is the second largest economy in the world, slightly smaller than the United States, and has been there, done everything, thinks that India is a partner which is important for them to pursue. I think that's a very critical thing. This not only unleashes possibilities on trade, where I, even despite those large figures, I'm not so very optimistic, but for India, unleashes something very important, which is a segue, a signal for European companies, European corporates with their technological and financial muscle to invest in India, the Indian market, and then, of course, the global market thereafter.
Okay.
This is something very important. The recognition of India as not just a trusted and a good player, but an important and a significant player for the world, and being done by the European Union. On our part, too, we are willing to now look a little bit beyond just the United States, which was dominating in various ways, and we are following our old principle of multi alignment. All of this, in my opinion, augurs well for India, but I want to say it also augurs well for the European Union, and I dare say for the world itself.
Okay, Mr. Srivastav, let me get a final word from you. In terms of, the sectors that were badly hit, leather, textiles, gems and jewelry, Europe, and particularly Western Europe, would be, some would say, a comparable market in terms of size and scale. How much do you think today's announcement will help address some of the concerns that these labor-intensive sectors here in India had?
So the best outcomes will be coming for labor-intensive sectors only. For example, the EU has very high tariffs, about 12% on garments from India. Now our competitors are, say, Bangladesh and Vietnam. The products of both the countries, they enter European Union at zero tariffs. So we were getting beaten there. Now with this FTA, we are hearing that we'll be getting zero tariff access to the EU market for most of the labor-intensive goods. So there will be a clear gainer in this. And the second part is the best part I like about this deal is that the product complementarity. For example, we are into labor-intensive products. So if we supply more and more, it will not hurt the EU domestic industry because they import most of these. So at best, India will be replacing other countries' product into the EU markets without hurting the EU local industries. EU is into high-tech and capital-intensive products like aircraft, machinery, this automobile components of high orders, high-end medical devices. So India doesn't make those things. So basically, it's a complementary product profile, and that's why both the countries are going to gain. When we do FTA with certain countries, there is local industry cry out. Here, in the case of this deal, I don't think any problem at the
All right.
local industry level will be there for most products.
Okay, Mr. Srivastav, Ambassador Puri, General Meston, and Tatiana, thank you very much for joining us. We're getting a piece of breaking news. I'm tossing it to my colleague, Christine.
Okay, news just coming in on the Jana Nayagan case in the Madras High Court. The single judge order has been set aside, says single judge should have given the CBFC time to file counter affidavit. The bench has allowed CBFC's writ petition. We're also learning that the matter has been remanded back to single judge for fresh hearing. So this is the latest coming in. The single judge order has been set aside is what we're learning. Remember, once again, the hearing came before the Madras High Court today, and now we're learning that the matter has been remanded back to the single judge for fresh hearing. Purnima Murli joins us with more details, which means no immediate relief for the producers of Jana Nayagan. Purnima, what more, what next?
Well, no relief for the makers and producer of Jananayagan, as the Madras High Court has pronounced its order allows writ petition filed by the CBFC. Now redirects the single judge to hear the case afresh, and also the earlier order passed by single Justice P.T. Asha, that in fact has been set aside, and says that the single judge should have given enough time for the CBFC to file a writ petition, and also asks producer to make changes to their prayer, and the case will now be heard fresh by the single judge. So now it's going back to the single judge, but this time CBFC should be given ample time to file the writ petition, and the case should be heard yet again. So at the moment, Jananayagan will not be released anytime soon. They'll now have to go back to the single judge P.T. Asha, who will once again hear the case. So long legal battle ahead for the producer of Jananayagan as well as for Vijay.
What about Team Vijay and Team TVK? Purnima, through the course of this legal battle, have they hinted at what legal options they're going to weigh in on next? They don't have a choice really here, because like you said, the case goes back to the single judge now, and CBFC has to be given enough time, which they'd contested against when the earlier order was passed. What legal remedies are they looking at currently? Speaking of TVK.
Well, now that the court has asked the producer to make changes to their prayer, now that it is redirected back to the single judge, we'll have to wait and see what the TVK as well as the makers of Jananayagan plan. Their argument so far as Jananayagan is concerned is that on the 19th of December, the movie was viewed by the censor board, and then on the 22nd they were asked to make cuts. They submitted back, and then the regional officer of the CBFC had said that they will be issuing the censor, so they were not communicated that this movie should now be reviewed by the review committee. They were not informed about it, and therefore they had announced that the movie will be released on the 9th of January. This has been the argument of Jananayagan makers or producers, saying that they were not given communication. Only after they moved the court did they come to know that the CBFC now wants the review committee to review this. They were not informed. The point of argument by CBFC was that they were not given enough time to file the writ petition, and therefore they had challenged the single judge Justice P.T. Asha's order. So right now they are exploring legal options. They'll now have to go back and present their side of arguments, and we'll now have to wait and see. But no relief yet for the makers of Jananayagan and for the actor Vijay.
The CBFC, remember, amidst all this, Purnima, amid this legal battle, is yet to certify the film. What's the prime contention which is being highlighted by the CBFC? What's not totaled for them to give a clear nod to the film? Because much of TVK's hopes have been on this film. It's being seen as a political drama. Election year makes it all the more interesting. What are those main concerns being spoken of by the CBFC?
Well, the CBFC first said that they were not given enough time to file the writ petition, and the single judge had passed an order without allowing more time for the CBFC to file their writ appeal. So that was the first point of argument. The second point of argument was that one of the committee members had filed a complaint saying that some visuals in the movie, they are hurting the religious sentiments, and therefore it should not be given a censor certificate. And they said, as per the act, there can be changes made by the CBFC. If one person feels that certain movie dialogues or visuals are hurting the sentiments of a particular section, then they can ask for a review committee to review the movie. There's nothing wrong. It's as per the act. So these were some of the points of arguments that were put forth by the CBFC, and the court also, while hearing the case, had asked why the producers had decided to announce the release date even before they received censor certificate, to which Jananayagan makers said that the regional officer of CBFC had said that they will be getting the censor certificate, and there was no communication on whether this movie will now be reviewed by a review committee. Therefore, they made the announcement. So we'll now have to wait and see how the arguments pan out before the single bench. They will once again start hearing the entire case. We'll have to wait for that development. But at the moment, TVK now trying to fight the legal case, and they'll have to go back to Justice P.T. Asha, and once again the hearing on this will begin. This time, the CBFC should be allowed to file writ petition. They should be given time.
Allow me to interrupt, Purnima. I'll come back to you in just a bit. AIDMK's Kovai Satyan joins us on the broadcast. Good morning, sir. What are your thoughts here? Because clearly now the matter is going to go back to the single judge. The story pretty much reaching where it all began. It's been remanded back to the single judge for fresh hearing. It's a setback for now for TVK chief Vijay and the producers and the filmmakers. But Vijay's come out with an interesting statement. He says he's not going to buckle under pressure. Do remember, Vijay's come out to say, and that was a veiled attack at some of the political stakeholders in the election-bound state of Tamil Nadu. He spoke of how he's not going to buckle under pressure. We'll reconnect with Mr. Satyan in just a bit. Purnima continues to stay on with us. Purnima, place that reaction in perspective for us. All right, Purnima will be joining us in just a bit. This is the big verdict coming in from Madras High Court in the Jana Nayagan case. The single judge order has been set aside. The case moves back to the single judge for fresh hearing. We're tracking that story very closely. Heading into a short break. We'll be right back with lots more.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
On more detail of what's set to unfold the next few hours, India-EU trade. Let's talk about the value that we're looking at here. It amounts to $136.5 billion. That's the India-EU trade that we witnessed in 2024 to 2025. Let's talk about that number in greater detail. Remember, European Union is India's largest goods trading partner. If we talk about numbers, data, 17% India's total exports are to the European Union and 9% of India's total imports are from the European Union. Further, EU investments in India from 2000 to 2024 pegged at $117 billion foreign direct investment. $117 billion FDI is what we're looking at. 16.5% of the total FDI in India is from the European Union. 6,000 plus European Union firms are present in India as we speak. So that's all in all the kind of trade between European Union and India that we've seen not just 2024, 2025, but ever since 2000s. That said, the FTA was being attempted for the longest time, 19 long years. Akanksha, you gave us, a brief history there, but let's talk about what's in store for India. Let's talk about what India is looking at achieving. We did briefly touch upon sectors that are standing to gain. We're also looking at, what the finalities could look like when we officially hear it from officials right after Prime Minister Modi meets Ursula von der Leyen. That said, the big takeaways really that are being expected this morning.
Right. So as I rightly mentioned earlier as well, it's not just the FTA that you're looking at, but it is the mother of all trade deals. You're also looking at a defense and security partnership, which, as you also shared earlier, is going to be focused on maritime security, counter-terrorism efforts as well, and interestingly, even mobility. So these three aspects are going to be top priority. But if you talk about the FTA, it's been important to highlight that you cannot look at the India-EU FTA in isolation. One has to look at it from the perspective of everything that's going on geopolitically, especially after how the Indian economy has been bearing the brunt of Donald Trump's whimsical approach to trade. And having said that, India has always maintained that its concerns with regards to our farmers, our MSMEs will remain top priority, and this is where the EU-India FTA will kick in a very advantageous and beneficial manner for New Delhi. Why so? Because from what experts have been telling us here at CNN News 18, Indian farmers need not be rattled. In fact, there will be a 27-member trading bloc opening out for our farmers over there, where you can expect fruits, vegetables, even our beverages like tea, coffee, more importantly, seafood exports, which bore the brunt, particularly, say, from states like Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Look at shrimps, prawns, cuttlefish, all of that had come to a halt, but now EU will give that impetus to this market. And in fact, as far as the United States is concerned, remember, they have been insisting that India opens up their market for the US farmers to dump their set of soybean, corn and other products, something India is not willing to do. So it is US, in fact, dumping their products into our market and not vice versa. But that is going to be one concern which EU is not going to be burdening India with. In fact, they will be looking towards exporting their set of wine, spirits and cheese. Even in cheese, they are saying that it is going to be mostly Gouda cheese from the Netherlands, and that's something India is already open to in terms of imports. So Indian agrarian sector is going to be sort of receiving a massive boost when it comes to the India-EU FTA. Having said that, there will be other aspects, and if you
Good morning and welcome back to our coverage of what is being touted as the mother of all deals. In an hour's time, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will meet with his European counterparts, the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and the head of the European Council, Antonio Costa, where they will announce the conclusion of the years-long negotiations on the India-EU FTA. After it's announced, it will create the world's biggest market of over 2 billion people, a quarter of the world's GDP. My name is Zaka Jacob. Welcome to our special morning coverage as we count down to that big mother of all deals announcement. Here are the headlines that we're tracking at 11 o'clock this Tuesday morning. After more than a decade of negotiations, India and the European Union are all set to finally seal the mother of all deals, with the signing scheduled for later today at the India-EU Annual Summit. Prime Minister Narendra Modi hails the India-EU trade deal. He says the deal will open up major opportunities for both India and for the 27-nation bloc. That's the European Union. As India and the EU are all set to seal a landmark trade pact asserting strategic autonomy, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent criticizes Europe's continued trade with India over Russian oil. The Madras High Court sets aside the single-judge order against the release of Vijay Stara Jananayagan. It says that the single judge should have waited for the certification board to file a counter affidavit. It orders for a fresh hearing by the single judge bench. A war of words erupts within the India bloc as Congress MPs and a DMK MLA clash over power-sharing demands, with Manikam Tagore countering threats by staking claim to Madurai North. As massive nationwide protests erupt against the UGC's caste equity rules, with general category students demanding a rollback, planning demonstrations outside the UGC office amidst a 100% surge in complaints. BJP calls Rahul Gandhi's refusal to wear the Assamese gamosa at the president's reception as insensitive and insulting to the Northeast and its culture. The Congress rejects the claim, saying that it's a misrepresentation and it's nothing but political drama. The debate over the entry of non-Hindus into Badrinath and Kedarnath. The temple committee calls the shrines sacred, not tourist sites. Chief Minister Dhami promises inclusive management, while the opposition claims move spreads hatred. The BCCI slams the Pakistan board for provoking Bangladesh in the ICC T20 World Cup, calls boycott threat unwarranted and accuses them of intervening without reason. Mumbai Metro Authority's school actor Varun Dhawan for doing pull-ups inside a metro coach says hang out but don't hang there, stresses that stunts are unsafe and can be punishable by law. Amid global trade disruptions triggered by US tariffs, India and the European Union are all set to sign a landmark free trade agreement hailed as the mother of all deals by none less than the European Union chief Ursula von der Leyen herself. The historic pact is expected to boost bilateral trade, investment, and supply chain resilience, benefiting both India and Europe. Under the agreement, several Indian goods, including textiles, chemicals, gems and jewelry, electrical machinery, leather, and footwear, are all likely to get duty-free access into the European Union. It's a 600 million strong market. Sectors like pharmaceuticals, IT, and manufacturing could also get a major export boost. But the partnership goes beyond just trade. It's not just the trade agreement that will be announced today. India and the EU are all set to sign a security and defense partnership agreement that will focus on maritime security, cyber defense, counterterrorism, and intelligence sharing. The historic FTA is not just about economics, it also signals a new era of strategic cooperation, positioning India as a trusted partner of the European Union. Prime Minister Modi has also hailed the deal, calling it historic, and added that the deal will open up a plethora of opportunities for the private sector in both countries and the bloc of countries that's the EU.
भारत और यूरोपियन यूनियन के बीच एक बहुत बड़ा एग्रीमेंट हुआ है। दुनिया में लोग इसकी चर्चा मदर ऑफ ऑल डील्स के रूप में कर रहे हैं। ये समझौता भारत के 140 करोड़ लोगों और यूरोपीय देशों के करोड़ों लोगों के लिए बहुत बड़े अवसर लेकर आया है। ये दुनिया की दो बड़ी इकोनॉमीज के बीच तालमेल का एक शानदार उदाहरण बना है। ये समझौता ग्लोबल जीडीपी के करीब 25% और ग्लोबल ट्रेड के करीब 1/3 हिस्से को रिप्रेजेंट करता है। ये समझौता ट्रेड के साथ साथ डेमोक्रेसी और रूल ऑफ लॉ के प्रति हमारे शेयर्ड कमिटमेंट को भी सशक्त करता है। साथियों, ईयू के साथ हुआ ये फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट ब्रिटेन और एप्टा समझौतों को भी कॉम्प्लीमेंट करेगा। इस ट्रेड डील से भारत में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग को तो बल मिलेगा ही, साथ ही सर्विसेज से जुड़े सेक्टर का भी और अधिक विस्तार होगा।
Is the mother of all deals. That's the phrase that Ursula von der Leyen used in the Davos summit just last week. So what does this actually entail? Which Indian sectors stand to gain? Remember, it comes in the context of rising trade protectionism, tariffs, etc. Textile and garments, these are extremely labor-intensive sectors. This will, of course, if there is going to be zero duty going into the European Union trading bloc, then that's a huge uplift for places like Tirupur, Ludhiana, etc. Pharma and organic chemicals, again, a big bunch of exports into the European Union will get a huge facelift as well. Gems and jewelry, again, badly hit because of rising trade protectionism. About 15% of India's exports into Europe are gems and jewelry. Places like Surat will hugely benefit if it's going to be reduced to zero duty. Electronics and mobile phone exports as well as processed foods, particularly shrimp and other seafood exports, will get a big bump up because of the India-EU FTA. But it's also about investments. It's not just about trade between India and the European Union. Of course, that is a huge factor, no doubt. 135 billion goods trade just in the year 24-25. But in terms of investments, over 117 billion. That's the amount of foreign direct investment in the year 24-25 that's come from Europe into India. That is 16.5% of the total FDI that's been put into India. It's not just American big firms that invest money, FDI, into India, but Europe too contributes 1 in 16. 16% of its contribution comes from the European Union. Also, more than 6,000 European companies are present in India right now, and that is a massive footprint from German automakers to Belgian gems and jewelry developers. It is a vast plethora of European companies that are present in India, all of whom will benefit from the announcement of the India-EU FTA. I want to bring in our reporter. Siddhant Mishra is joining us from Hyderabad House, where in about an hour or so, both Prime Minister Modi and his European counterparts, Ms. Ursula von der Leyen and Mr. Antonio Costa, will be meeting for the delegation-level talks. Akanksha Swaroop is also joining us live from there. Siddhant, first of all, put into context for our viewers why this is being touted as the mother of all deals, the India-EU FTA.
Well, Zaka, India is India's second largest trading partner is European bloc, and in fact, this particular deal with will create market for more than 200 billion people, and perhaps there are a lot of Indian companies working in Europe, a lot of European companies already working in India. Now, going by the reports, now there is no official confirmation on this, but maybe by the evening there's going to be the press conference, and in that we will get to know more about this trade deal. But what we have managed to gather after speaking to sources, and in fact what has been reported, then for the European car manufacturers like Mercedes, BMW, Volkswagen, etc., India will be opening up market for these car manufacturers. So earlier, the import duties used to be 110%, 70%, 80%, something like this. But now these duties will be slashed to 40% and further to 10%. So for them, it's a big boost for the European car manufacturers. But as far as EV vehicles are concerned, Indian government has decided to keep it protected for now, because there are a lot of Indian automakers perhaps which have just entered the EV segment, and they have started manufacturing EV vehicles. Point number one. Point number two, as far as Indian view is concerned, how it's going to benefit India, then given 25% additional tariff from the United States, India is looking for more diversification for its goods, gems, jewelry, textiles, etc. So, there will be more exports of these products to the European countries. Also, there would be more collaboration between European and Indian countries. This deal will also create more conducive atmosphere for trade, removing tariff lines, non-trade barriers, etc., etc. So this is the reason that this deal is being called the mother of all deals. Having said that, Zaka, there are two other significant developments or rather announcements which will be made today. One is defense and partnerships pact, perhaps focusing on the maritime security, more joint production, joint manufacturing between Indian and European countries. And third is the mobility agreement, because given the atmosphere around this entire immigration issue in Europe and in many of the Western countries, EU will be giving, European countries will be giving more visas to Indians, young, skilled Indian professionals, researchers, students. So that will be more opportunities for the Indians in Europe.
Okay, Akanksha, also in terms of, what will be announced today is the successful conclusion of the FTA negotiations. There's still some ways to go before it's implemented. It has to be legally scrubbed by both sides. The European Parliament will have to ratify it. The Indian Parliament will have to ratify it. So walk us through what happens after this, and by when will we likely see it getting implemented on the ground?
So time is of the essence, given that it's already taken 19 years for this FTA to be worked out. We can expect a speedy ratification. But what's more important to understand is the word that's coming in from the EU delegation at the moment, all the way from, say, the EU President Ursula von der Leyen. You were in that exclusive conversation with the EU Council President, Mr. Costa, and even the EU High Representative of Foreign Affairs, Kaya Kallas. They all are saying that it is reliability which is going to form the basis of this foundation for this FTA between India and EU. Why is there so much emphasis on reliability? Because that is exactly what's missing at the moment when it comes to the United States and a climate which is extremely divisive and nihilist, primarily because of the Trumpian tariffs. As you rightly highlighted in our earlier discussion, Donald Trump has announced 25% tariffs today itself on South Korea, a country with which they had already forged a deal. EU and the US have already suspended their own FTA, which was forged last year, because there was a fresh set of tariffs slapped on EU after Greenland became a bone of contention. So reliability is what is missing out here today in today's economic climate. limit, which is the case with the United States. So that is why EU is insisting that there should be an expedited ratification when it comes to this deal. And it seems the word that we are getting in from the Commerce Ministry, as Commerce Minister Mr. Piyush Goyal said, that it's already almost done. It's already taken 19 years since 2007 was when the BTAIA actually was struck first. So we can expect that to happen, and EU is already saying that EU will emerge as a more reliable partner for India than Russia, than China, than the United States. We'll have to see because the devil lies in the details. What the details are, we shall know in some time from now.
So one of the things that they will likely keep out of this deal is agriculture, because this is a sensitive matter both here in India as a big farmers constituency, also in some key European players like France and Germany, etc. The farmers constituency is very, very strong and powerful, and therefore likely agriculture will be kept out of this India-EU FTA, the conclusion of which will be announced later today. But I want to thank both our reporters. We'll come back to you as and when we get the first pictures. At about noon is when we expect the official talks to begin in Hyderabad House. Ursula von der Leyen will be leading the European side. Prime Minister Modi will be leading the Indian side. Let me just quickly introduce our guests. Ashok Sajanhar, former diplomat, joining us. Sonia Parashar is Secretary General of the Federation of European Business in India. Andrew K.P. Leung is a China strategist. We want to get a China perspective in this as well. But I want to first go across to Mr. Bernd Lang. He's a member of the European Parliament, an MEP, and the chair of the European Parliament's Committee on International Trade. Thank you very much, Mr. Lang, for speaking with us here on News 18. The European Union is on the cusp of concluding this major trade agreement with India. It will be announced. In fact, it is the world's largest FTA, creating a combined market of 2 billion people with the fastest major growing economy in the world. It opens up this huge market to European people, to European companies. How and why is this agreement both for Delhi and for Brussels in your point of view?
This is really a significant trade agreement because, on the one hand, it is really stabilizing a rule-based trading system, which is under attack from several forces worldwide. And the two biggest economies, the European Union and India, are now working together based on rules. And secondly, it's really giving a big economic impact on both sides. So, of course, the tariffs will really decrease, but also services will be offered on both sides. So it is in support of the economic development on both sides, and this is needed in this really challenging times.
Mr. Lang, the negotiations for the India-EU FTA have been going on for almost 2 decades now. What, according to you, were the toughest red lines during these negotiations? We're also given to understand that sensitive sectors like agriculture, dairy, etc., which are sensitive both here in India as well as in Europe, may likely sort of be left out, or at least they would carve that out from the announcement. How does it ensure that these sensitive sectors are protected?
Of course, we recognize that we have some specific sensitive sectors on both sides, specifically in the field of agriculture. So I guess, for example, milk and milk powder will be excluded, and beef, for example, as well. But in principle, of course, also the agriculture sector is part of the agreement, but recognizing that there are specific sensitive areas. But this is not undermining the agreement. I guess this is also a clear signal of fair partnership.
But it's also coming, against the backdrop of massive global trade realignments that we're seeing with the tariffs. Why is this FTA such a strategic win? And it comes at a strategic time, both for Europe and India, at a time when the rest of the world is looking at stable, reliable markets, supply chains, and trade agreements.
We are sticking both to a rule-based trading system. We see that the rule of law is important for both, and this rule of strength is not our approach. We want to have real partnership. And therefore, sometimes, of course, also the agreement is asymmetric because India is on the developing way and they have a much higher GDP growth per year than the European Union. But that's okay because we want to have development which is going in a similar situation where the people on both sides have the possibility to create their livelihood on their own. So it is really supporting the economic and political development. So in this agreement, we have not only the rules of trade, but also rules regarding the acceptance of labor rights, of environmental standards, of the implementation of the Paris Climate Agreement. So it is really a book of fair partnership.
I also want to ask you, Mr. Lang, in what ways does this India-EU FTA, which is being touted as the mother of all deals, is it a sort of hedge, and how does it help sort of cushion the rising trade protectionism that we're seeing? How is it a hedge against rising, escalating US tariffs and protectionism? Because, Mr. Trump has been threatening those against Europe as well, not just against India, which has not concluded the FTA with the US yet, but even with Europe around Greenland. He threatened an extra 10% tariffs to walk back on them. How does this help in trying to cushion some of those blows?
Yeah, of course. Looking around, it's totally clear that at the end of the day, this unjustified policy of President Trump should not be really recognized by the rest of the world. And I guess it's totally clear that the trade volume of the United States is only around about 15% of global trade volume. And I guess the other countries are really now in the mood to join together and stabilize the system.
Right, Mr. Bern Lang, thank you very much for joining us, and many congratulations. You've been a key player as the chair of the International Trade Committee in trying to push through this deal. So thank you very much for joining us. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, it's just less than a minute break. When we come back, we'll open it up to our panelists and try and get a sense of why this is being touted as the mother of all deals.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Not more detail of what's set to unfold the next few hours. India-EU trade. Let's talk about the value that we're looking at here. It amounts to $136.5 billion. That's the India-EU trade that we witnessed in 2024 to 2025. Let's talk about that number in greater detail. Remember, European Union is India's largest goods trading partner. If we talk about numbers, data, 17% India's total exports are to the European Union, and 9% of India's total imports are from the European Union. Further, EU investments in India from 2000 to 2024 pegged at $117 billion foreign direct investment. $117 billion FDI is what we're looking at. 16.5% of the total FDI in India is from the European Union. 6,000 plus European Union firms are present in India as we speak. So that's all in all the kind of trade between European Union and India that we've seen not just 2024, 2025, but ever since 2000s. That said, the FTA was being attempted for the longest time, 19 long years. Akanksha, you gave us, a brief history there, but let's talk about what's in store for India. Let's talk about what India is looking at achieving. We did briefly touch upon sectors that are standing to gain. We're also looking at, what the finalities could look like when we officially hear it from officials right after Prime Minister Modi meets Ursula von der Leyen. That said, the big takeaways really that are being expected this morning.
Right. So as I rightly mentioned earlier as well, it's not just the FTA that you're looking.
Welcome back. We're discussing the mother of all trade deals between India and the European Union, which will be announced today when the official talks happen between Prime Minister Modi and Ursula von der Leyen, who is the European Commission President, and Mr. Antonio Costa, who is the European Council President. Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, with us. Ms. Sonia Parashar is the Secretary General of the Federation of European Business in India. Andrew K.P. Liang is a China strategist joining us. Mr. Sajjanhar, let me start with you first. Everybody's talked about the headline numbers, $2 billion people market. It's going to be a quarter of the world's GDP. Already we're trading 135 billion, expected to go upwards of 200 billion once this is signed. But aside of the headline numbers, this deal coming as it does now, why is it important and what signal does it send?
Yeah, thank you very much, Zaka, for having me. I think when we are talking about this trade deal, we should consider it not being a mere trade deal. I think it really sends out a very clear and a strong message that India and the European Union are determined to strengthen their strategic partnership. It is much beyond a trade deal. That is what I would like to suggest for your and your viewers' consideration. Because along with it, the underlying factor, as I think was brought out by Akansha also, is trust. So far, we have seen, particularly over the last 1 year since Mr. Trump came to power, that trust is one commodity that has been sorely missing in all the global interactions. So here you have the trade deal. You spoke about the headline numbers. They're very, very impressive. And so, I think that is going to be a very strong basis. But it is not only trade. And when you're talking about trade, it is also in terms with economy, it's also strategic cooperation, participation. So you have security defense agreement, you have mobility agreement. So, what are the two big issues that India has been having with the United States? The H-1B, that is in terms of your people who are going there, and also in terms of tariffs. Here, when Mr. Merz was here, what was he looking at? He was looking at Indian talent coming there. And I would suggest, that the dominance of the United States at, in tech field globally is to a very significant extent due to the Indian talent that goes there. If they are shunning the Indian talent, there are so many other takers for it. Definitely, Europe is one of them. If you permit, I'll just mention one case when I used to be ambassador to Sweden. And at that time, that was the first Zaka mobility agreement that we signed. And legally, Indians who were coming there, they became the largest numbers. And now we have signed this mobility agreement with a large number of countries. So Europe is looking for Indian talent. There is trust, there is confidence. As Ursula von der Leyen said in Davos, when you shake hands and you say that it's a deal, you consider it to be a deal, but not with Mr. Trump. So I think whether it is security defense, that is going to be another area. So I think these are all areas: trade, security, mobility, defense cooperation, Indo-Pacific. These are all areas which are the ask for both sides. So it's a win-win deal on each and every area.
Sonia Parashar, as somebody who represents European business here in India, of course, Indians have two questions which invoke their curiosity. One is that, what European goods get cheaper? Is it German cars, French wine, etc.? And vice versa also. Indian exports into Europe, particularly in labor-intensive sectors like textiles and garments, gems and jewelry, footwear and leather, if it's going to be zero duty across the 27 countries of the European Union, what may that mean for these sectors which are facing some stress recently?
Thank you for inviting me to this panel. First of all, the mood is very exhilarating and very vibrant here. We've got about 6,000 new businesses active in India. And if I just compare the number to what is present in China, that is roughly about 3 times what is present in India. So with this deal, the market access is the most important priority. And as per our FABI Business Sentiment Survey, which is being released today, it is going to boost the confidence of the current investors, but also the ones who are sitting on the fence will also be looking at the market very, very intensely right now. And in terms of duties, of course, we will hear later once the press conference happens, but market access and also a major investment. So 95% of our respondents of the survey, they are all very keen to increase their investments over the next 5 years. because there is the confidence in demand growth, policy continuity, and the ability to scale profitability.
Ma'am, just give me 1 second. We're getting live pictures from the Rajghat where both
Sure.
Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa have just arrived there. They're paying their respects to the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi. This, of course, is part of protocol. Every time there is a visiting head of state or head of government, the first port of call is Rajghat, where they pay their respects. And then, of course, they will head to Hyderabad House, where they will have the official talks with Prime Minister Modi and his delegation, the Indian delegation. It will have the Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar. It will have the National Security Advisor and a whole host of other ministers and officials who are part of the Indian delegation. Of course, the European delegation has come with its largest set of CEOs as well, as they intend to announce the conclusion of the India-EU FTA negotiations. Yesterday, when I spoke to Mr. Costa, the European Council President, he did make a mention about what a great honor it was to be the chief guest for the Republic Day Parade, and how he got to see the diverse breadth of India, whether it is the states which have put up their different tableaus for the Republic Day Parade, or various sunshine sectors in India, which also got representation this time as part of the Republic Day Parade, or the impressive military arsenal that was on display as well. So he had made a mention about how India's diversity is its biggest strength, and today they will be marking their official engagements with this visit to Rajghat, paying their respects to the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi. Like I said, in about half an hour's time, they're expected to go to Hyderabad House, where the delegation level talks will begin. I want to go back to our guest, Ms. Parashar. You were saying that European businesses obviously are very keen to expand their businesses here in India. 6,000 plus European businesses who already have a footprint. Obviously, we're expecting that number to significantly increase once this FTA is announced. But it's become also a world where trade is being viewed in sort of zero-sum games. American tariffs, China weaponizing supply chains, etc. I don't want to compare Europe-China trade to Europe-India trade, but is this also sending out a signal that at a time when trade is becoming very fickle, countries are not minding weaponizing trade, that India and Europe, two middle powers, if I can use that phrase, are sending a signal that we are upholding the global rules-based trading order, and that there will not be any unilateral change of the status quo when it comes to the change of the trading order, as it were, and that what businesses want, which is a stable, predictable sort of roadmap and framework for doing business, both India and Europe are going to give that to business through the announcement of this FTA. Ms. Parashar?
Yes, I also wanted to make a point that these companies from EU are not present in India. They've been for the last 5 or 10 years, but they've been present for decades here. So they looked at the Indian market with trust and reliability. But the fact that the EU-India FTA negotiations closure is being announced today, this will only boost the confidence of these companies as well. So it is, for me, it's almost like marriage vows being renewed, because this is not a new friendship. It's an old friendship which is being seen with a renewed vigor. And it's a perfect timing because with the multipolar world, with the current geopolitical situation, 2 large democracies, 28 states in India plus union territories, and 27 member states, and that's why it's also being called the mother of all the trade deals.
Let me get Mr. KP Leung, Andrew KP Leung's view also. He's joining us from Hong Kong. He's got a view on China. Obviously, this is, like I said, at a time when China has just announced, I think a few days back, its trade surplus, $1 trillion trade surplus. And clearly, countries around the world that do business with China are also concerned about the imbalance of the trade. India is certainly concerned, so is Europe. In fact, the European leaders were there in China last summer. I think President Macron was there in December. It's also a signal to China that we want a more balanced trade, that we can't be over-dependent on just one country for global supply chains. And those vulnerabilities were exposed during COVID and the years after COVID.
I think that there are 2 dimensions here, which are, of course, a game-changing kind of dynamics. One is, of course, the whole world supply chain and the world rule-based trading order have been totally disrupted, if not thrown out of the window. And of course, there is a collapse of trust as far as the European Union is concerned, in the long-established so-called transatlantic alliance between the European Union and the United States. Not only on the economic front because of tariffs, but also even on security. Witness what's happening to Greenland, belonging to Finland. So I think that this is a rebalancing, hedging, first of all, against the increasingly imperialistic and unilateral United States. But it's also a hedging against China because the European Union, of course, welcomes China as a trading partner. And you can see that a lot of European leaders making a beeline to China, but not to embrace China entirely because, again, China's ultra competitive products are destroying a lot of the industries in the host countries, and of course, apart from differences in ideology and so on. So, in a way, that is also a hedging, a rebalancing against over reliance on China, as you mentioned. Not least China's weaponization of the rare earths and supply chain. Not so much against the European Union, but because China wants to maintain total control to prevent these rare earths being re-exported from the European Union to the United States. But nevertheless, it would upset the global supply and value chain. So this mother of all deals is also a hedging against China.
All right, that's a great point. I want Ambassador Sajjan to weigh in on this as we get live pictures from the Hyderabad house, where we're expecting both leaders to arrive there about noon, which is when the official delegation level talks will begin. But this whole thing around rare earths, people have been talking about, the Ukraine deal, part of it being around rare earths, the Greenland deal being partly around rare earths, etc. But ultimately, it boils down to rare earth processing. That's what President Trump said in his address to Davos last week. A bulk of the processing, I think about 90% of the processing, happens in China. So if you're talking about reliable supply chains, what is the world doing to diversify its supply chain of rare earth processing away from China?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. If you permit, I'll just make one point on, what your earlier two panelists said about hedging. I don't know whether hedging would be the right word to use, because hedging would give the impression that you are doing it on a temporary basis because, it's a moving sort of, a platform, and you are hedging, you're wanting stability for that period. I think this agreement that has been signed, of course, it is to take care of the uncertainties on the American side. It's also to take care of the uncertainties on the Chinese side. But it is a long-term agreement. It is not hedging in a temporary sense that you are doing it right now, and of course you could be compelled, or you could change it going forward. Coming to your question about what the other countries are doing, I think definitely there is a movement, and not only United States. Of course, the trustworthiness of United States has been put under a huge question mark, but whether it is India, Japan, Australia, it is when the Indian Prime Minister visited Africa, it visited South America, Argentina, Brazil, etc. There are all these rare earth mineral agreements that are being signed everywhere. So I think now there will be much greater focus, much greater investment that will go into that area. The last point I'll make here, Zaka, is you remember when the Quad first summit was organized in Washington, D.C., what were the three elements that were there? There was critical minerals, and critical emerging technologies. So, it has been with us, but the focus and the attention on that, in my view, has grown much greater because China has suddenly started weaponizing it. Otherwise, people thought that they would be able to have access to it as and when they wanted it.
Okay. I also want to play out a small excerpt from the interview that I did with Mr. Antonio Costa, he's the European Council President, and I asked him to qualify for our viewers why this is being touted as the mother of all trade deals and what may this mean both for Europe and for India. I want to thank our guests for joining us this morning. As we take a break, let's play out an excerpt from Mr. Costa's interview. The India-EU FTA is expected to be concluded and signed. What can you tell us about that?
Well, first of all, we are crossing fingers to conclude the negotiations of the FTA. It will be very important, both for EU and India. It will be the largest free trade agreement in the world, 2 billion people. Is the largest trade agreement ever signed by India or the European Union. Then I hope that today we achieve to conclude in the proper way this agreement. On the other side, we have other agreements. One very important on security and defense, and the third one on mobility. These, I think, there are three big achievements from this summit.
So it comes at a time when there's a lot of trade protectionism, tariffs are being used almost like a weapon. Tomorrow when you sign the agreement, the FTA, what signal does it send to global capitals around the world?
I think it's a very strong and important message to the world. That means that EU and India believes more on the trade agreements than to tariffs. Then we believe that free trade boost economy, create jobs, and promote prosperity. And this is what we want, to have shared prosperity. And that's why this agreement comes in the most important moment, perhaps. Comes later, but in the right moment, because now more than ever it's important to show how it's important. The European Union is now engaged around the world. We have already 78 trade agreements, and we are increasing our efforts to conclude new trade agreements. Last week, we signed with the Mercosur, a very important trade agreement, and we have already signed with Mexico, with Indonesia, and we continue to negotiate with different countries like Thailand, Emirates, United Arabs, then a lot of.
But particularly with India, because it's such a huge market, 1 billion people. Again, what is it that you hope the world takes away from this free trade agreement?
First, this trade agreement is very important to boost our economies, but it's also a very important geopolitical stabilizer, because now the world is challenging by protectionism, by the rise of tariffs, and then it's important to this message.
From the Hyderabad house of Prime Minister Modi, flanked on either side by the European leaders, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and the European Council President Mr. Antonio Costa. They are, of course, leading the European delegation for the talks with the Indian side, where they will announce today the India-EU FTA, the conclusion of negotiations of the India-EU FTA. You can see the Prime Minister being flanked on either side by the two leaders of Europe, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and the European Council President Antonio Costa. So clearly, the Prime Minister, taking into his hands the hands of both Ms. Ursula and Mr. Costa, signaling that this is a victory, this is a win-win. There you go. Handshakes and, the deal is done. I think that's the message that's been sent out very clearly with the shaking of hands, with the raising of the hands to try and send a signal that the deal is done. The India-EU FTA, which is being touted as the mother of all deals, the biggest free trade agreement anywhere in the world, creating a market of 2 billion people, quarter of the world's GDP, that deal is done. It will be announced today when both leaders come out and they will give their joint press statements. That's expected to happen a little past 1 o'clock. But there you go. Both the leaders and with their raised hands, this is a huge signal from India, from Europe, certainly to the rest of the world, but also to their respective domestic constituencies, that the world's biggest deal, which is touted as the mother of all deals, is being done here in Delhi. There you go. The hand on hand, palm on palm for each of them. If we can get one of our reporters, we'll try and make sense of the body language as well. Of course, in diplomacy, that plays a huge role as well. That both sides are beaming, they're exuding confidence. They know that this announcement will have huge ramifications, not just for their own trading arrangement, no doubt about it. For India, Europe is the largest trading partner at $135 billion, even bigger than India's trade with China or India's trade with the United States. So it'll send out a huge signal. They have set a target of $200 billion once this FTA comes into effect. Whether or not they'll be able to cruise past that, and $500 billion in the next 10 years. That's the steep target that's been set by the leadership on both sides. Whether or not the private and public sectors will be able to live up to those expectations, we'll have to wait and see. But the FTA has taken a long time coming. Negotiations started in 2007. It got called off in 2013. But certainly in the post-COVID era, the resumption of the negotiations happened in 2022 after COVID, when the world started realizing that for resilient and dependable and trustworthy supply chains, the world needs to move beyond just one country, which was China. There was an over-reliance and over-dependence on Chinese trading systems and supply chains. So the world wanted to move away from that, as we see the Prime Minister and the two European leaders, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and the European Council President Antonio Costa, walking down the corridor at Hyderabad House, the flags of both the European Union and the Indian tricolour there on either side. And as they pose for the cameras, the holding of hands, the raising of their arms, signalling that the deal is done. The India-EU FTA, the mother of all deals, the biggest free trade agreement in the world, is today a done deal. You will hear officially from the leaders when they have their joint press conference after their delegation level talks. Akanksha is joining us live. Akanksha, so very, very positive pictures of the two European leaders and the Prime Minister holding hands, raising their arms. Is it a signal that, yes, the FTA is done and it will be announced to the world shortly? And how will it be received across the globe, from Asia to Europe to the United States?
Absolutely. And Zaka, this is the big announcement, mother of all trade deals, as it's being called. India and EU ties go all the way back to 1962. But more importantly, the first summit happened in 2000. In 2007 is when the BTAI actually was struck. And ever since, negotiations have been happening. Several roadblocks happened, and today's moment is actually marking that achievement of being able to cross over those roadblocks and finally coming to that common understanding through this FTA. We speak at a time when it is the economic security which is also becoming the pathway to a strategic cooperation, as is seen the way US is currently approaching partnerships through, say, pact silica. And this is what the EU FTA and the overall focus on security and defense, even say mobility partnership, is going to ensure, which is going to be a strategic partnership of sorts as well. India, as you rightly highlighted, is joining hands with EU at a time when the climate is extremely deeply geopolitically divided, economically divided, thanks to the Trumpian tariffs. We speak on a day when the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has already come out with a very scathing attack. As you said, it's almost sounding like a broken record when it comes to attacking India's purchases of Russian oil, which, as we all know, have already been phased out, are at the lowest. But the message is loud and clear, one that already began to formulate at Davos when Ursula von der Leyen actually made that announcement about the mother of all trade deals being on the anvil with India. And so India is looking towards, in fact, now reaching out to a market of a 27-member trading bloc. You're looking at farmers benefiting, because after the tariffs that came into effect, it is the Indian farmers, our agricultural sector, the MSMEs, as you've also been highlighting, gems, jewelry, leather, manufacturing, which will receive a boost. And not to forget the crackdown on the H-1B visas in the United States and on skilled labor. That's going to find a boost now in the European markets. To just quote the figure, in 2024 itself, Indians were in fact the ones who received maximum authorizations when it came to being issued the blue card. And it is Indians who are looking towards the European market for research, for study. So you can expect a bump up when it comes to Indian students or even skilled labor looking for jobs. Through this FTA alone, we're looking towards Indians receiving at least close to 8 million jobs, quite close to 2 million jobs for EU. So there's a lot that lies out here. I also want to briefly touch upon security and defense. Apart from, finalizing maritime security, you can also expect focus on the Indo-Pacific to return, because this is what the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Kaya Kallas, has in fact explained, the EU already has a partnership going on with South Korea and with Japan. And so Indo-Pacific and the security of the Indo-Pacific remains a strong concern for them at a time when Quad is in fact dormant or even dying a slow death, with the US president really not focused on the Quad's priorities. India could very much come back or return to its role of playing, say, the gatekeeper to the security in the Indo-Pacific.
I just want to talk a little bit about, the mobility agreement that you're talking about, and at a time when there is stress on, immigration, not just into the US, we're seeing that in some parts of Europe as well. There is an anti-immigrant sentiment. To announce this and to sign this labor mobility agreement, which will cover students, highly skilled professionals, researchers, healthcare workers, etc., at a time when there are more than 1 million, if you were to include both non-resident Indians as well as persons of Indian origin who are living across the European Union, excluding the UK, of course, the 27-member bloc, million plus folks who are living there. What signaling does it send out to other countries where this has become a huge stress? There is an anti-immigrant sentiment that is rising in the West. Both countries sort of putting their best foot forward and saying that, look, we are welcoming the best talent that is available in the world, whether that's Indian engineers, Indian doctors, Indian PhDs. What is the signaling at a time when there is huge stress on the whole immigration debate?
You already named it, Zaka. These are actually the very individuals who are bearing the brunt of the immigration crackdown, particularly in the United States, and especially when entrepreneurs from small to medium enterprises were concerned, students mostly, and that's when, they started looking towards, say, other economies or markets, whether it is Canada, whether it is the UK. Even when the UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer made that visit, he promised that education will be a top focus. And so you can expect that now, even with this FTA and this mobility partnership that India is going to be forging with the EU, not to forget, India is a country with a majority youth population. You're looking at 1 billion youth population with a median age of 30 to 31. And that is the population which will now be looking towards, say, tapping into the 27-member bloc that the EU is, with, say, countries and successful developed economies like Germany, like Italy, like France, all of them opening their gates now to Indian skilled labor, even students and researchers, many of them from the medical and engineering professions. Zaka.
So, like I said, there are over 500,000 Indian citizens, non-resident Indians, who are living in the 27-member bloc outside of the UK. A large number of them go to Germany, to France, to Italy. Of course, many of them are highly skilled professionals. They're either engineers, software workers, healthcare workers, who are spread across a large number of European countries at a time when there is a rising anti-immigrant sentiment that we're seeing on either side of the Atlantic. You're certainly seeing that in Western Europe, you're seeing that in the United States, and mobility of skilled workers is becoming a bit of a concern around the world. The fact that India and the European Union will be signing today a labour mobility agreement, and they've announced that as well, I think sends out a huge signal to the Indian diaspora that Europe is welcoming highly skilled Indian professionals, whether they are PhD holders, whether they are researchers, whether they are technical staff. I think it's a significant one. I want to now go across to another special guest who's joining us. Lisa Curtis is the director with the Indo-Pacific Security Program at the Center for New American Security. So the India-EU FTA, it's dubbed as the mother of all deals, Lisa. President Trump continues to threaten higher tariffs on India. The announcement today, how important is this? Not just for India and for Europe, but in reshaping India's economic orientation?
Well, first, let me express my congratulations to the people of India on your Republic Day. It's an honor to be on the program on such an auspicious day. With regard to the India-EU trade deal that may be coming up, may be announced soon, I think that this will help give India some leverage in its trade talks with the United States. Because what it will show is that India has other options, that Indian traders can export their goods to other nations. So this will, I think, help in terms of the direction of the US-India trade talks because it gives India some leverage. And also, I think another thing that is contributing to moving things forward with US-India trade talks is the fact that India is, in fact, reducing its imports of Russian oil.
Okay.
There was a reduction last month in Indian imports of Russian oil. So I think, this will help with the US-India trade talks.
I do want to ask you, Lisa,
moving
about
forward.
the appending of the global trading order with the Trump tariffs and so on and so forth. Every country has been affected. India's been affected as well. Has that now turned out to be a bit of a blessing in disguise because it compelled both Delhi and Brussels to diversify their trade partnerships?
Well, I don't really see it that way because I think India is a very important strategic partner for the United States. And I think that President Trump has mishandled the relationship with India on several fronts. I think on the trade front, I think slapping a strategic partner with 50% tariffs, some of the highest tariffs in the world, that is a mistake. I think India has been an important strategic partner of the United States, and that should not have happened. So I don't really see it as a blessing. I think it's a challenge that now we need to work toward relieving. I think the Trump administration should provide tariff relief to India. And I think it's time for the conclusion of a US-India trade deal. But I think, that's a trade deal where both sides will have to compromise. And my understanding is that India has come forward with a good trade deal for the United States, that it has offered a lot, has put a lot on the table in that trade deal. So I think it's time to conclude that trade deal, and hopes are high that with Ambassador Sergio Gore now there in New Delhi in place, saying a lot of positive things about the US-India relationship, that perhaps there will be a trade deal soon.
So, the one other thing, and this has been brought into sharp focus in the last 5 years or so since COVID, is that the world suddenly realized how much they're dependent on China for reliable supply chains. There was an over-dependence on China. So do you think the India-EU FTA will also reshape the Indo-Pacific supply chains, which are currently heavily leaning on China?
Well, I think it's important for the US to continue to see India as a major trade and investment partner, and particularly when it comes to technology. I mean, we've seen US firms investing in India's AI sector in terms of data centers. And so clearly, US companies see very much an opportunity and the future of technology in India, and see India as an alternative supply chain for technology. So there's lots of room for US-India continued cooperation when it comes to technology and AI. And I think, that will continue. So I think it's up to the Trump administration to recognize that, to recognize all the opportunities, and that India is important when you're talking about developing alternative supply chains to China.
I want to talk a little bit about China because, India also has a substantial trade relationship with China, again, over $100 billion. There are only 3 trading blocks that India does over $100 billion trade with. One is China, the United States, and of course, Europe. But it's heavily skewed in China's favor. There's a massive trade deficit as far as India is concerned. Will the India-EU FTA also help increase or the opening up of Indian exports into China, forcing Beijing to import more from India?
Well, again, I think if the India-EU free trade agreement is made, as we're all expecting, then I think that does give India more leverage in all of its trading relationships, whether it's the US, China, or any other country. So it gives India options. It shows that India is a global player, an important market, and I think it kind of helps its overall trade outlook. So I think that, we can see this as an accomplishment for India and its trade agenda. Of course, there have been concerns that President Trump will somehow be mad about the India-EU free trade agreement. Who knows what he might tweet on social media. But I think, all in all, overall, it gives India leverage in its other trade talks, including those with the United States.
All right. Lisa Curtis from the Center for New American Security, Director of the Indo-Pacific Security Program there. Thank you very much for joining us here on News 18. We'll take a quick break here on the program, but news and updates continue right on the other side of this quick break.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
On more detail of what's set to unfold the next few hours, India-EU trade. Let's talk about the value that we're looking at here. It amounts to $136.5 billion. That's the India-EU trade that we witnessed in 2024 to 2025. Let's talk about that number in greater detail. Remember, European Union is India's largest goods trading partner. If we talk about numbers, data, 17% India's total exports are to the European Union and 9% of India's total imports are from the European Union. Further, EU investments in India from 2000 to 2024 pegged at $117 billion foreign direct investment. $117 billion FDI is what we're looking at. 16.5% of the total FDI in India is from the European Union. 6,000 plus European Union firms are present in India as we speak. So that's all in all the kind of trade between European Union and India that we've seen not just 2024, 2025, but ever since 2000s. That said, the FTA was being attempted for the longest time, 19 long years. Akanksha, you gave us, a brief history there, but let's talk about what's in store for India. Let's talk about what India is looking at achieving. We did briefly touch upon sectors that are standing to gain. We're also looking at, what the finalities could look like when we officially hear it from officials right after Prime Minister Modi meets Ursula von der Leyen. That said, the big takeaways really that are being expected this morning.
Right. So as I rightly mentioned earlier as well, it's not just the FTA that you're looking at, but it is the mother of all trade deals. You're also looking at a defense and security partnership, which, as you also shared earlier, is going to be focused on maritime security, counter-terrorism efforts as well, and interestingly, even mobility. So these three aspects are going to be top priority. But if you talk about the FTA, it's really important to highlight that you cannot look at the India-EU FTA in isolation. One has to look at it from the perspective of everything that's going on geopolitically, especially after how the Indian economy has been bearing the brunt of Donald Trump's whimsical approach to trade. And having said that, India has always maintained that its concerns with regards to our farmers, our MSMEs will remain top priority, and this
Hello and welcome, and thank you so much for staying with CNN News 18. I'm Riha Atul. Let's begin with the headlines. After 9 years of negotiations, India and European Union to finally seal the mother of all deals, with signing scheduled today. Prime Minister hails India-EU trade deal, says deal will open up major opportunities for both India and the European Union bloc. As India and EU are set to seal a landmark trade pact asserting strategic autonomy, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent criticizes Europe's continued trade with India over Russian oil. Madras High Court sets aside single judge order, says single judge should have waited for certification board to file counter affidavit, orders fresh hearing. War of words erupts within India bloc as Congress MPs and DMK MLA clash over power sharing demands, with Tagore countering threats by staking claim to Madurai North. Massive nationwide protests erupt against UGC's caste equity rules, with general category students demanding rollback, planning demonstrations outside the UGC office amid 118% surge in complaints. BJP calls Rahul Gandhi's refusal to wear the Assamese Gomosha as president's reception insensitive and insulting towards the northeastern culture. Congress rejects the claim, calling it misrepresentation and political drama. Debate over entry of non-Hindus into Badrinath Kedarnath temple. Committee calls shrines sacred. No tourist sites. Chief Minister Dhami promises inclusive management, while opposition claims move spreads hatred. BCCI slams Pakistan for provoking Bangladesh in ICC T20 World Cup. Rao calls boycott threat unwarranted and accuses them of intervening without any reason. Mumbai Metro authorities school actor Varun Dhawan for doing pull-ups inside a metro coach. Say hang out but don't hang there. Stresses stunts are unsafe and can be punishable. And let's begin with our top focus story, as all eyes are on the global India and the European Union as they move to sign a landmark free trade agreement hailed as the mother of all deals by the EU chief herself. The historic pact is expected to boost bilateral trade, investment and supply chain resilience, benefiting both the regions. Now, under the agreement, several Indian goods, including textiles, chemicals, gems and jewelry, electrical machinery, leather and footwear, are likely to get duty-free access to the EU. This historic FTA is not just about economics, it's also signaling a new era of strategic cooperation, positioning India as a trusted partner of the European Union. Prime Minister Narendra Modi too has gone on to hail the deal, calling it historic, and he's also added that the deal will be opening up a plethora of opportunities for both the nations.
भारत और यूरोपियन यूनियन के बीच एक बहुत बड़ा एग्रीमेंट हुआ है। दुनिया में लोग इसकी चर्चा मदर ऑफ ऑल डील्स के रूप में कर रहे हैं। ये समझौता भारत के 140 करोड़ लोगों और यूरोपीय देशों के करोड़ों लोगों के लिए बहुत बड़े अवसर लेकर आया है। इस ट्रेड डील से भारत में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग को तो बल मिलेगा ही, साथ ही सर्विसेज से जुड़े सेक्टर का भी और अधिक विस्तार होगा।
Now let's break down why this trade deal really matters and the reasons that are in fact something that we are talking about. Reason number one that we'd like to put out for our viewers is how this diversifies the supply chains, reducing the reliance on just the United States of America and China. The second and the most important reason is this will provide a bloc-wide access to all the 27 European Union nations, unlike bilateral FTAs that were the norm in the past. Now, if we also take a look at the symbolic boost for India, Delhi now emerges as a strategic hub as far as European Union is concerned. And that really is also that shift that one is talking about as far as India's trade negotiations with other countries barring barring the United States of America and China are concerned. This is also going to be a step in a major job creation, as 8 to 10 million Indians are going to be benefited. 1 to 2 million in the European Union also are going to be benefited. Now, India, remember, is the ninth. Is the ninth free trade agreement in 4 years for India, and this will be reflecting the aggressive trade diplomacy that India is so proudly underlining. This is also, in fact, an access to the European Union markets, and this boosts exports, investment, and also the tech inflows into the country. Seventh reason that we'd like to put out is, of course, the gateway to deeper cooperation in technology, climate and defense. Remember, climate also became a huge part of discussion even during Davos, and this also will be giving ample amount of impetus to not just defense and technology, but also climate change. Let me just now take this across to my colleagues Siddhant Mishra and Akanksha Swaroop, who are joining us from Hyderabad House. In fact, we'll go to our colleagues in just a bit, but before that, we are talking about this historic agreement between the European Union and India, and how this is a pivot by India also that one must look at, particularly in the face of the penalties that have come in from the United States of America vis-a-vis Russian oil, the procurement of Russian oil. All of that also needs to be looked at, and at the same time, this major development that has now come about. Very, very soon we will begin to hear from Hyderabad House. In fact, my colleague Akanksha Swaroop is joining us live from right there. Akanksha, the feelers that you're getting before we actually go out to our guests, what is it that one is hearing from inside? I believe you have a guest along with you.
No, I don't have a guest. I very much have our own in-house reporter, Siddhant Mishra, who's joining me. So let me quickly bring in Siddhant into the conversation. So Siddhant, there's a lot of focus on the FTA. What many are failing to also recognize is that it is the mobility pathways which will now be opening up when you're looking at a frontier of 27-member trading bloc like the EU. Siddhant.
Well, that's right, Akanksha. Also, given the atmosphere around this immigration issue from United States to Europe, most of these countries are tightening up when it comes to giving visas to Indians. Now, there are three key announcements today. One is the conclusion of talks. Second is defense and securities partnership, and the third is the mobility agreement. Now, the other day I was speaking to senior officials in Brussels, and they confirmed this to me that they cannot divulge much details about the agreement, what category, etc. But more or less, they explained it to me that now there will be more visas given to Indian students, researchers, and it's young skilled professionals. So that's the good news for all those who want to go to Europe to work. And also, Akanksha, given the recent developments, H1Bs, etc., tightening norms, so it will be a completely new place for the Indians, new opportunities for the Indians to be working in Europe for the European companies.
Quick one point is on the emphasis on security and defense partnership. Remember, with Donald Trump's emphasis on trade and tariffs, a lot of focus has been lost out from Indo-Pacific. But EU very much has a partnership in defense with Japan, with South Korea, and that is what they are looking towards, bringing the focus back on the Indo-Pacific through India. So, Siddhant.
Well, that's right. So, in fact, we have elevated partnership with the European Union to strategic partnership. Now, why this is significant, Akanksha? Because largely what I'm being told is that the focus will be on maritime security as far as this particular agreement is concerned. But also it will open doors for more Indian and European companies to collaborate. It's not that India has not been engaging with the European countries, whether it's France, Germany, Rafale, submarines, etc. Those things were happening. But it will give more opportunity for joint production, joint manufacturing, and also the biggest, how I look at it, is that the biggest fear in the minds of the European leadership, Akanksha, for the longest time was that India is close to Russia. So we can't trust India. So that was like, they may not say it openly in public, but when we used to speak to with the European diplomat, they used to say that, you're close to Russia. Your military hardwares, your softwares are, they are well aligned with the with Russia. So that was the biggest hesitation. But it looks like that both countries have now come to the same page, and there's going to be more deeper collaboration.
And one quick word on the mother of all trade deals, why it's being touted so also, because it's taken 19 years to forge it. Secondly, why is it actually faring better than what the US is expecting out of India? Shed light on all of those factors.
Well, as far as India's policy is concerned, Akanksha, this government's policy is concerned, they believe in free flow of trade, opening markets. And this is the reason that in last 2.5 years, India has successfully signed, announced 9 trade deals. All India wants is the other country to respect India's sensitivities, respect India's concern. Perhaps whichever country has respected that, the deal is locked, the deal is finalized with that country, whether it's UK, whether it's Europe, or whether it's Australia.
Akanksha and Siddhant, I'll come to you in just a bit. We have our guests also waiting for us on the broadcast. Tara Karta, former director, NSCS, is with us, and also Shashank, former Foreign Secretary of India, joins us on the broadcast. Ms. Karta, coming to you first. It's very, very safe to say now that this entire geopolitical shift has, in fact, revived the India-EU trade pact. Something that we've been talking about is now coming to fore and fruition after 19 long years.
I think it's like your Akanksha just said, it's far more than a trade deal. It is a recognition of each other as partners, which itself is hugely important. I mean, we were nowhere at the top in terms of trade with Europe. Second, to me, is the evolving the defense and security partnership. Let's see where that goes. That is of tremendous interest because we've never had this with European Union in the past. Their concept of strategic was, climate security, it was food security, all of which is important. Cyber security. We never transitioned into actual defense. So this itself is a huge leap forward, considering that I would also say a little cynically that we have a 60 billion euro defense market coming up. I am pretty sure many of these countries will want a slice of that. That is one. Number two, of course, is the obvious, the US thing that you are looking for more partners in the Indian Ocean region. Remember, France has the largest EEZ of all in the whole world in the Indian Ocean. So you're looking at other partners other than the US. So there is the very fact that there is a certain unease in the Trump administration shows that this is very, very important. I mean, I'm so glad that this has taken place.
Right. And Shashank, if we talk about, let's say, food, chemicals, engineering goods, that one is looking at this FTA that has been signed today, the EU has implemented these wide net of strict regulations, and that has in the past discouraged exports from India. That steep compliance burden also probably was addressed while the three leaders were in the room.
Well, many of these things which had been discussed over a long period of time, and the Europeans used to be very technical and their priorities were different from those of India. I think certainly they have been put under the pincer of China and USA, USA through its tariff policy, and China by creating very, very high technology items and ruining the manufacturing capabilities in Europe. So I think now Europe has come to realize that India would be a good partner in this matter. There's a possibility that they would avoid the threat of 100% tariff as it has been called out on Canada when they went in for trade with relationship with China, or they have been talking about Europeans taking advantage of the Russian oil being processed in India and buying it and then telling the Indians and the Russians that, well, they should come to peace on Ukraine. So I think, therefore, EU has now come to realize
that India has an Atmanirbharta priority. So they should be willing to transfer some of their technologies to India, and they should be willing to have partnerships on a wider range of basis. Now, I'm not very sure whether everything has been taken care of, or there are still sensitive points with regard to the two sides. But I hope that we are able to move in due course on this trade as well as the defense and security partnership. It's extremely important, and not only for us, between Europe and us, but also I think that gradually we should also be able to move in a more confident manner with other partnerships like RCEP in East Asia, and also in our discussions with China and with the United States.
Shashank and Ms. Karta, do stay on with us. We have to break down the kind of trade that India is looking at, and this is the major exports that India does into the European Union. So here's a breakdown of that as well. We're looking at petroleum that stands at $15 billion. If we take a look at electronics, that is at about $5.1 billion. And this is what we have. So 15 billion, a major export there as far as petroleum is concerned. 5.1 billions for electronics alone, if we have the next set of graphics for our viewers. And if we take a look at organic chemicals, that in fact stands at $5.1 billion, I beg your pardon. And then if we go further and take a look at iron and steel, that stands at $4.9 billion. So this is the kind of exports that India does and goes, that the products go into the European Union. If we take a look at garments and textiles, they stand at $4 billion. There's also the pharma products that are exported into the European Union, and they stand at a whopping $3 billion. Also taking a look at gems and jewelry, they stand at over $2.5 billion. So this is the kind of export that India looks at with the EU. When it is about imports, if we further look at imports that are coming in from the European Union into the country, if we take a look at industrial machinery, that stands at $13 billion US. And further, if we take a look at electronics, then they go up to the tune of about $9 billion US. Aircraft is at $6 billion. So that too is something that India looks at importing from the European Union. Also medical devices, another important aspect, $3.8 billion for medical devices. And if we take a look at mobile phone parts, that stands at $3.7 billion. So this is a rough breakdown of exports and imports as far as India and European Union is concerned. But we were essentially wanting to understand about what are the differences that have so far been able to be ironed out as far as this gap of 19 years of back and forth is concerned also, Ms. Karta. The fact that this has been inked, it has been called the mother of all deals, it has been mentioned by the EU chief herself, and that is what makes it rather significant. But if we take a look at the global reactions, particularly from the United States of America, how do you see that? How do you see that little bit of a rider that's coming in from the US even while this deal was being inked?
Yeah, that was, I think, Scott Bessent who
Yes.
was saying that, if you have a deal, then in that case, the tariffs for the Russian import of oil comes back, all that stuff, which, I mean, the deal hadn't been signed yet. He hasn't seen the details. He doesn't know what it's about, but he sees fit to comment on it anyway. So this is, basically peak, saying that how could the EU at a time of, when they are levying tariffs on the European Union turn to this huge market in India, which is at the moment he is sanctioning us. So it's a kind of triangular, what shall I say, a kind of a mismatch which Trump is looking at.
But he's also threatening to sanction the EU.
He will sanction everybody. I mean, then there's nobody left for him to sanction, right? You've got Canada's Prime Minister coming soon. He's put 100% tariffs. He's coming to India. I mean, this is, I just want to say, Jayashankar's created this word plurilateral. You remember that is typical Jayashankar dialogue. Now it's all over. Everybody's doing plurilaterals because of what Trump has done in terms of tariffs. But on a more serious note, what I don't know what the carbon tax, what has been, it's been, we'll have to wait till details come. But I would really, really welcome EU investment, especially in green energy, because our import bill is huge. Oil buying anyway is a problem politically in different ways. And the fact that our pollution, right, massive pollution, we desperately need green energy. And the EU, unlike the US, takes this very seriously. The US, US is going in the opposite direction, where the Trump is saying drill, baby. He's kind of drilling all over the place. He wants Greenland, he wants everything. He wants Venezuelan oil. So at this point, for me, I was just looking to the list of, the 2021, I think when we had that strategic agreement, 20, if I'm not wrong. These are the issues which we had highlighted. And I'm hoping that comes to fruition. Also, if I can just make one point.
Sure.
At this time, European Union is politically very unstable. All the countries, each one. So for them, and that comes from lower GDP rates, higher unemployment, higher issues because of the Ukrainian war. This trade deal is timely for the European Union themselves. For their political futures, this deal is extremely important.
But Shashank, is it also an opportunity for Ms. von der Leyen to maybe, in a way, try to mollycoddle India into shifting their stance when it is about Ukraine, for that matter, to the benefit of the EU? Do you think that is going to happen? And also, while we were having that conversation about the United States of America, is this also the first few steps of isolating a major economic power in the world?
No, if EU leaders talk about trying to get India away from Russia, that would be more with reference to their domestic constituencies, because there's a lot of opposition within EU itself for their European Union making a deal with India. While the Russian oil is being purchased, though they in less quantities by India, and the Russian defense items also form the backbone of the Indian defense vis-a-vis our neighbors. So I think, therefore, they have a domestic issue which they are taking care apart from the pressure from the Americans. But I think we have to realize that the EU economy right now is at a more or less at a standstill and likely to go into a downward spiral, because the Chinese are moving very rapidly in new technologies, and it's no longer a question of stealing from Europe or America, but the Europeans and Americans are really afraid where China has reached and what it will do in the next 10, 15 years. Similarly, India is also one of the largest, among the larger countries, one of the fastest growing countries. And IMF has now agreed to put India's growth potential on a higher pedestal. So therefore, they know that their own economies would suffer unless they take advantage of the skill development capabilities in India and the young technical manpower in India.
Absolutely.
I think, therefore,
mobility becomes an absolute must and very, very important aspect that we have to discuss further. But right now, very, very short of time, I'd like to thank both Ms. Tara Karta and Shashank for joining us and sharing their very, very important views here on this historic trade pact, the free trade agreement between India and the European Union. We go into a very short break with that.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Across to Prime Minister Modi, he's speaking on the India Energy Week, just ahead of the India-EU FTA being signed.
कल ही भारत और यूरोपियन यूनियन के बीच एक बहुत बड़ा एग्रीमेंट हुआ है। दुनिया में लोग इसकी चर्चा मदर ऑफ ऑल डील्स के रूप में कर रहे हैं। ये समझौता भारत के 140 करोड़ लोगों और यूरोपीय देशों के करोड़ों लोगों के लिए बहुत बड़े अवसर लेकर आया है। ये दुनिया की दो बड़ी इकोनॉमीज के बीच तालमेल का एक शानदार उदाहरण बना है। ये समझौता ग्लोबल जीडीपी के करीब 25% और ग्लोबल ट्रेड के करीब 1/3 हिस्से को रिप्रेजेंट करता है। ये समझौता ट्रेड के साथ साथ डेमोक्रेसी और रूल ऑफ लॉ के प्रति हमारे शेयर्ड कमिटमेंट को भी सशक्त करता है। साथियों, ईयू के साथ हुआ ये फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट ब्रिटेन और एप्टा समझौतों को भी कॉम्प्लीमेंट करेगा। इससे ट्रेड और ग्लोबल सप्लाई चेन दोनों को मजबूती मिलेगी। मैं भारत के नौजवानों को, सभी देशवासियों को इसके लिए बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। मैं टेक्सटाइल, जेम्स एंड ज्वेलरी, लेदर एंड शूज ऐसे हर सेक्टर से जुड़े साथियों को भी बधाई देता हूं। ये समझौता आपके लिए बहुत सहायक सिद्ध होगा।
Welcome back. You're watching CNN News 18 with me, Griha Atul. Let's now take a look at this controversy associated with Rahul Gandhi and the Congress party, and that erupted over Rahul Gandhi's attire at the Republic Day function at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. After the BJP claimed that he did not wear the traditional northeastern patka, terming it insulting and deeply insensitive. BJP's Amit Malviya even claimed on social media platform X that Rahul Gandhi didn't oblige even after President Draupadi Murmu reminded him twice in the at-home reception at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. Sharing photographs of everyone from the Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge to Prime Minister Narendra Modi wearing the patka, Malviya also posted an image of Rahul Gandhi standing without one at the gathering. Taking offence, Assam Chief Minister Hemanta Biswa Sarma has lashed out at Rahul Gandhi, saying that this repeated insensitivity towards the Northeast explains why the Congress has lost significant ground in the region in the recent years. The Congress has now countered this with a Rajnath Singh image, claiming that even the defence minister was not wearing the gamusa.
नॉर्थ ईस्ट का अपमान, यही है कांग्रेस पार्टी की पहचान। कांग्रेस पार्टी नॉर्थ ईस्ट से नफरत करती है। राहुल गांधी जी जब राष्ट्रपति के एट होम रिसेप्शन पर थे, उनको रिक्वेस्ट की गई, एक नहीं दो बार, कि सारे डिग्निटरीज ने, सारे महत्वपूर्ण लोगों ने हमारे नॉर्थ ईस्ट का गमछा, गमोसा, पटका पहना है, आप भी पहन लीजिए। तो राहुल गांधी ने धिक्कार दी इस बात को। राहुल गांधी ने आदिवासी समाज से आने वाली राष्ट्रपति की बात को भी धिक्कार दिया और नॉर्थ ईस्ट के गमोसे या उस पटके को भी धिक्कार दिया। और ये पहली बार नहीं है, हमने बार बार देखा है कि नॉर्थ ईस्ट का गमोसा उनको दिया जाता है, असम का गमोसा वो पहनने से इनकार करते, वो हटा देते हैं।
भाजपा के आईटी सेल में राष्ट्रपति जी के जो उनका एट होम रिसेप्शन था, घर पे जो रिसेप्शन था, वहाँ पर कुछ चित्रों को लेकर वो बहुत प्रश्न उठा रहे हैं। और फिर जब कांग्रेस के लोगों ने दिखाया कि जो वो बातें राहुल गांधी जी के संदर्भ में उठा रहे हैं, वही बातें राजनाथ सिंह जी पर भी लागू होते हैं, तो फिर भाजपा चुप हो जाती है। तो मुझे लगता है कि कहीं ना कहीं इस प्रकार की राजनीति से हमें उठना चाहिए।
And we're getting an update as Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge has now gone on to say, and I'm quoting, petty politics over Patka. BJP deliberately is creating these issues to try and form government in Manipur and Assam. When we go to the northeast, Rahul Gandhi even has gone on to lead a foot march from Manipur. He has fought for the people of the northeast. Listen.
संविधान को अपमान करने वाले लोग दो अपोजिशन लीडर्स को तीसरे पंक्ति में बिठाते हैं और वो स्टेट मिनिस्टरों के साथ खड़ा करते हैं। छोटी चीजों को यानी हम तो गौरव करते हैं, हम जाते हैं और मणिपुर से हमारा पदयात्रा निकाली, राहुल जी ने वहां से निकाले, तो ये इसको बड़ा चढ़ा के बोल रहे हैं और ये लोग वहां जाने के लिए भी डरते थे मणिपुर। ऐसे लोग नॉर्थ ईस्ट का अपमान कांग्रेस ने किया, ये कहने का, ये मैं समझता इसको कंडेम करता हूँ। ये पर्पसली कर रहे हैं, इलेक्शन के लिए कर रहे हैं।
Let me take this across to my colleague Pallavi Ghosh, who is now with us on the broadcast. Pallavi, this latest reaction by the Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge, it seems that with the Patka or the Gamucha, that entire Manipur issue is back into the discourse.
Oh yes, absolutely. Because see, Rahul Gandhi had repeatedly made the issue about Manipur. Not only did he do the second leg of the Bharat Jodo Yatra from Manipur, but he also, went twice. And he's always consistently made this attack on the Prime Minister and the Home Minister, especially on the Prime Minister, that till recently you did not even have the time to go and address the concerns of the people of Manipur. You talk about the Look Northeast policy, you talk about development in the Northeast, but when it comes to these little important things, you don't even give them any kind of an importance. And today, this opportunity at home of the President on 26 January is now being used to hit back at Rahul Gandhi that you also have to learn to walk the talk. The Patka is given as a symbol of acceptance and acceptance of the culture and ethos of the people of Northeast. That was something which was outrightly rejected by you. According to reports which are coming out, he was offered this by the President herself and he rejected it and he only held it in his hand. And unlike the many others that you're seeing at the at-home event, he did not even put it around his neck or shoulder. That is going to be used by the BJP, politically speaking, to accuse him of not walking the talk, of disrespecting Northeast. And, we are seeing elections coming up in Assam in a couple of weeks' time. Over there also, I'm sure it's going to be made into a poll issue by the BJP and the Prime Minister himself that he may want to come back to power in Assam. But when you don't even respect the cultural identities of the people of the Northeast, do the people even want to vote you?
And the other bit of counter that is also coming in from the Congress party, from the Assam MP, Mr. Gaurav Gogoi, with that strategically placed patka on his shoulder when he's giving that soundbite, also lot on in the visual also, Pallavi.
Yes, I was also about to mention that, Griha. Gaurav Gogoi himself is fighting that battle in Assam, and a very aggressive one at that. And he also, I think, made his own political point by wearing that patka. And in fact, he wears that every time he addresses the media or whenever he does his campaign in Assam. Not just that, you also had a post put out by Pawan Khera where he again put out pictures of the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, throwing it back into the court on the BJP and asking them, what about looking into the mirror? Will you raise the same point about the Defence Minister or even the INB Minister Ashwini Vaishnav not wearing the patka in one of those pictures which have come out? And therefore, unlike you, we at least have taken up the issue of Manipur and we don't need to be told what the importance of the Northeast is all about.
Well, absolutely, Pallavi. Thank you so much for that perspective. Let's take a look at some more reactions that are coming in.
We all know that there is a systematic insult on the opposition, and particularly opposition leaders Mallikarjun Kharge ji and Rahul Gandhi ji, and Mr. Modi and Amit Shah ji wants to continue this insults on the opposition. We can see that Mr. Kiran Rijiju's video that the culture minister Mr. Shekhawat is not wearing that patka. The MO's education Jitin Prasad is not wearing the patka. Rajnath Singh ji is not wearing the patka. Why this kind of level of politics? Why BJP wants to do to portray these kind of behaviors?
Now we are getting some details from the Hyderabad House where the EU chief Ursula von der Leyen has reacted to the trade pact between India and the European Union, and she's gone on to say, and I'm quoting, Europe and India are making history today. We have concluded the mother of all deals. We have created a free trade zone of 2 billion people with both sides set to benefit. This is only the beginning, she says. My colleague Siddhant Mishra with that information. A big update that's coming in, Siddhanta, and a huge statement by the EU chief herself.
Well, that's right. This is perhaps for the first time, Greha, that a confirmation is coming from the EU leadership about the conclusion of trade talks between India and European Union. So all this while we have been running, stories, on the confirmation that we got from Brussels that likely to be announced, etc., etc. But we can say that this is the first official confirmation coming from EU leadership, where Ursula von der Leyen has confirmed that both India and European Union have concluded the trade talks. So it's a big moment. This was started way back in 2007. Talks broke down in 2012. Then again, it got accelerated after 2022, and now finally, India and European Union have concluded the trade talks. Now it's going to take another 1 year, if I'm not mistaken. There's going to be the legal scrubbing and then ratification from each of the parliament of every European country, and after which there will be the formal signing, and that formal signing likely to take place in Brussels.
Right, Sadan, thank you so much for all of those inputs there. We are shifting our focus now. Let's talk about those massive protests that erupted outside the University Grants Commission, or the UGC office, with the general category students now claiming the new equity rules favor the marginalized group and lack the safeguards for the general category. The UGC's Promotion of Equity in Higher Education Institutions Regulation 2026 aims to address caste-based discrimination, but critics argue that it creates an imbalance. Here's a ground report.
A new regulation that has garnered widespread outrage at the University Grants Commission, now Equality Promotion Rights, that has witnessed a massive uproar. Right now at the University Grants Commission headquarters here in ITO, there is a group of people who have sit on a dharna, and on this protest, what they are demanding on these posters is Modi ji roll back UGC. Modi ji roll back UGC posters are up here, saying that the new equality promotion rights notification that has been brought by the UGC is against the general category students in the higher educational institution. The higher educational institutions, which are in fact also at the forefront of facing caste-based discrimination in the university, is being criticized right now for the constitution of an equality cell here. Now let us also speak to some of the protesters here who are gathered here. सर, ये यूजीसी के खिलाफ आपने एक प्रदर्शन किया है, आपके मैं पोस्टर्स देख रही हूँ, मोदी जी रोल बैक यूजीसी, क्या ऐसी प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, ऐसा क्या आपका प्रोटेस्ट है यूजीसी के खिलाफ?
यूजीसी कानून को लागू करने में स्वर्ण समाज के स्टूडेंट को पहले से ही अपराधी मान लिया गया है, उनकी कोई सुनवाई नहीं है। अगर अदर जो ओबीसी या एससी एसटी का कोई भी कैंडिडेट स्वर्ण समाज के किसी स्टूडेंट के खिलाफ कंप्लेंट करता है, चाहे वो झूठी हो, उसकी बात मानी जाएगी, और झूठे केस करने वाले के लिए झूठी कंप्लेंट कोई सजा का प्रावधान नहीं है। जांच जो है वो पार्शियलिटी के साथ होगी। जब हमारा स्वर्ण समाज का प्रतिनिधि नहीं होगा तो उसकी जांच फेयर नहीं हो सकती।
लोगों का ये कहना है कि जो जांच है वो निष्पक्ष नहीं होगी।
भैया देखो, ये तो बिल्कुल बात साफ है। साफ ऐसे है कि हमारे लोगों को रोका जा रहा है बाहर। एक बात बताओ, हमारे ये 5-5 लेयर सुरक्षा कैसी लगा रखे हैं? क्या इस देश में सबको अधिकार नहीं है प्रोटेस्ट करने का? हमारे लोगों को गलत रास्ता बता करके भटका दिया जाता है।
पुलिस और प्रशासन का लॉ एंड ऑर्डर को बरकरार रखने के लिए सुरक्षा की व्यवस्था की गई।
एक बात बताइए, सवर्ण समाज ने कब इस देश में लॉ एंड ऑर्डर बिगाड़ा? सवर्ण समाज हमेशा राष्ट्रभक्त रहा है, और सवर्ण समाज ने कभी लॉ एंड ऑर्डर बिगाड़ने का काम नहीं किया, बनाने का काम किया है। लेकिन आवश्यकता पड़ी तो बिगड़ेगा भी। जिस तरीके से हमारे लोगों को रोक रहे हैं, या आने दें तो
अभी यहाँ पे प्रोटेस्ट किया।
हाँ, प्रोटेस्ट करेंगे। जब इनका कानून ही निष्पक्ष नहीं तो ये कैसे निष्पक्ष जांच करेंगे बताओ? यही जिसमें ये बताया गया कि ओबीसी, एससी, एसटी और महिला और जो है दिव्यांग के ही रहेंगे, और तो सामान्य वर्ग के लोग रहेंगे ही नहीं। जब उसमें रहेंगे नहीं तो निष्पक्ष कैसा? ये तो सरासर पक्षवाद है, ये जातिवाद है। इसको खत्म किया जाए, अन्यथा देश का भविष्य गर्त में है। मैं बता रहा हूँ, युवा आपस में लड़ेगा, और युवा लड़ करके और देखेगा देश खंडित हो जाएगा।
तो आपको ऐसा दिखता है जो नेपाल में हुआ वैसा हो जाएगा?
बिल्कुल वैसा ही होने वाला है। ये कराना चाहते हैं देश के राजनेता, ये हिटलर शाही स्थापित करना चाहते हैं इस देश में।
And more updates coming in. We seem to be getting a clarification from the government. As per top government sources, they have said that the centre will soon be issuing a detailed clarification to counter the misinformation that is surrounding the newly notified UGC regulations on campus discrimination. The rules, which came into effect on the 13th of January this year, are intended to strengthen the protections against caste-based and other forms of discriminations while ensuring fair treatment for all students. So this is a sort of clarification that will officially be coming about. My colleague Payal has got us those details and that little scoop that's coming in through highly placed government sources. Payal, this was the main area of concern, that these rules have gone on to remove these provisions that are punishing false complaints and lack the protection for non-SC, ST or OBC students. And this is what the ground report also that Simran had got us for really suggested were the many voices. Now this clarification of the government.
Yes, it's a very important clarification that is coming to the fore. The government of India wants to assure the people of the country, especially the youth, that there will be no unfair treatment that is going to be meted out to any section of the society. That is a guarantee that the government really wants to give. And if at all there are any further clarifications that are required, that will be done as well. The government is of the opinion that a lot of myth is being spread, a lot of misinformation is being spread. The interpretation of the rules is not being done in the right manner as well. And that is actually being done with a bid to try and create, a situation that will be actually a situation of unrest that is going to be rubbished out by the government. So there will be more campaigning which will happen as far as that is really concerned, because remember, protests have broken out not just in the national capital where our colleague Simran is reporting from, but multiple resignations within the BJP office bearer groups have also taken place. As far as this law is really concerned, people are calling it the black law. There are people who are part of the judicial magistrate in one section has resigned, one DM from Uttar Pradesh has resigned, and a lot of anger has been witnessed in Uttar Pradesh alone, if you can put that into perspective as well. So that is something which the government of India is very well aware of. They are in fact speaking out and devising a strategy whereby they can actually clear all the air and tell people that this is not a rule or a set of rules that are being brought to antagonize any section of society. Is going to be fair and square for everyone. So obviously more interpretation needs to be done in that interpretation of that particular rule has to be done in a proper manner. So the government is obviously going to come up with a series of clarifications and bust a series of myths that are being created by certain sections of society.
Right, absolutely. And Payal, when the government will go on to eventually clarify that the core objective is to promote equality, inclusion and accountability in higher education institutes, amid this political criticism, at least that clarity really is becoming very, very imperative. We have, in fact, Simran, who is now joining us on the broadcast. We also have our other colleagues who are joining us. But Simran, coming to you first, since you have been bringing us those ground reports. Nikita also is live with us. Nitika, I beg your pardon, from Lucknow. Now, Simran, the key argument that many students from the general category really had put forth is that these regulations are creating a presumption of guilt against general category students. Will they be calm now? Will the protests really allay in some sort of a way now that this clarification is coming by the government?
Well, in fact, there is an indication that this protest could be directed into some other direction after the clarification is issued. But so far, at this point of time here in the national capital, what really comes as a big uproar over the entire regulation of the UGC that has brought in strengthening of the measures over the caste-based discrimination in the higher educational institutions. Here, the group has been protesting since 10 a.m. in the morning against these equality promotion rights and regulations, which have in fact promoted most of the higher educational universities to also curb the caste-based discrimination. And let me also show you how exactly the protest has been intensified with more people joining in. Modi ji roll back UCG is what they are showing, and if we speak to them exactly to why exactly they are protesting and why exactly their protest is lodged, ये बताइए कि आपने ये लिखा है मोदी जी रोल बैक UGC, तो UGC तो यूनिवर्सिटी ग्रांट कमीशन है, रोल बैक तो रेगुलेशन करेंगे ना?
नहीं तो
कोई भी कानून बनता है तो प्रधानमंत्री को पता तो होगा इस कानून के बारे में कि क्या बन रहा है। तो प्रधानमंत्री देश के राजा हैं, वो कहेंगे तभी तो वापस होगा कानून है। मोदी जी के इसीलिए हम प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे हैं कि ये कानून वापसी चाहिए, इसमें संशोधन नहीं मानेंगे।
आप लोग कभी कैंपस गए हैं? आप लोग हायर एजुकेशनल इंस्टीट्यूशन गए हैं?
जी मैडम, हम लोग पढ़े लिखे, हम लोग कॉलेज नहीं गए हैं। वो तो खेलने का उम्र है, आपस में मिलजुल कर रहने का उम्र है, उसमें आप नए नए कानून लेके आ रहे हो। जो बच्चे आपस में लड़ाई भी करते हैं, प्रेम भी करते हैं, और 2 मिनट में उसमें कंप्लेंट करवाओगे, उनको 3 साल की सजा करोगे। कमेटी में कोई हमारा स्वर्णों का मेंबर नहीं होगा। ये कानून हमें वापसी चाहिए, तभी हम मानेंगे। अभी तो हम टेलर दिखा रहे हैं ना, अभी तो पूरा देश बंद करके उनको पिक्चर दिखाएंगे।
देश बंद की आप लोगों ने कॉल दी।
अगर अभी हमें कुछ सूचना मिले है सूत्रों से कि इस पे वो कमेटी बना रहे हैं मोदी जी हमारे, इसीलिए हम देखेंगे।
सरकार का कहना है कि जो मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन हो रही है उसको एक विराम चिन्ह लगेगा और उसके बाद एक कमेटी के हिसाब से आपको बताया जाएगा कि क्या आपकी दुविधा है, उसको देखा जाएगा।
नहीं, दुविधा हमें कुछ नहीं है। दुविधा हमें यह है कि हमें कानून वापस चाहिए, और कोई दुविधा नहीं इसमें। ये कानून वापसी चाहिए।
के आधार पे कोई भी चीज देना, कुछ भी करना, वो जातियों में विखंडन करना है। तो जातियों में देश को बांटोगे तो देश का एकीकरण, एकत्रीकरण कैसे होगा?
जो एकमात्र ओपिनियन है वो ये है ना कि जाति के अगेंस्ट डिस्क्रिमिनेशन होता है, इसीलिए ऐसा किया गया।
आप एक बात बताओ, जब हम बच्चे छात्र, हम भी छात्र थे, पढ़ते थे, तो कोई नहीं पता हमें कि कौन SC BC OBC, वो ध्यान नहीं रहता था, तो हम आपस में कई बार लड़ते भी थे।
पर आजकल
the essential argument that's coming in from a campus in the national capital is that this entire attempt, these regulations are to promote equality, but they are going ahead and not really promoting equality. This is what the common opinion that is coming in from that campus really is. Let's get in a word from a campus in Lucknow, from where my colleague Nitika is standing by. Nitika, the other aspect that has created a lot of furor is this mandatory establishment of equal opportunity cells or equity committees. Many of these students of the general category are fearing that all of this will act as kangaroo courts. What is the perception that you really have got from the campus there? What are the people, the students saying about this?
See, we are here at Lucknow University where the students are protesting against the new laws, new regulations of UGC. You can see कि यहाँ पर कई सारे स्टूडेंट्स जो हैं वो लगातार सुबह से प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे हैं। इनकी यही मांग है कि जो UGC के नए रेगुलेशंस हैं वो वापस लिए जाने चाहिए, और जो ये UGC के नए रेगुलेशंस हैं वो डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी हैं। जो स्टूडेंट्स हैं उनमें फॉल्स कंप्लेंट्स की जो शिकायत है वो ज़्यादा बढ़ सकती है और इनका मिसयूज़ भी किया जा सकता है, जिससे जो जनरल कैटेगरी है वो ज़्यादा मिजरेबल है मिसयूज के लिए। तो यहाँ पर जो तमाम स्टूडेंट्स हैं वो यही मांग कर रहे हैं कि जो UGC के नए नियम हैं उन्हें वापस लिया जाना चाहिए। और स्टूडेंट से हम यहाँ पर बात भी करेंगे कि क्या आपकी मांगे हैं वो बताइए।
मेरी मांगे यही है कि जो काला कानून है समाज का विभाजन कर रहा है, छात्रों का विभाजन कर रहा है। छात्र की कोई जात नहीं होती, छात्र तो एक समरसता के भाव में, एक बंधन में बंधे रहते हैं कि छात्र भाव में। ऐसे छात्रों को तोड़ने का काम ये फरमान कर रहा है। सरकार वापस ले, अन्यथा सरकार टूट जाएगी, गिर जाएगी, मुंह के बल गिरेगी।
आप बताइए कि क्या क्या मांगे हैं आप लोगों की? आप लोग सुबह से प्रोटेस्ट।
मैं समझता हूँ UGC लाने की आखिर ऐसी कौन सी आवश्यकता आ गई? क्या हम लोग समांतर व्यवहार पैदा करने वाले लोग नहीं है? मैं सवर्ण समाज से आता हूँ, मेरे साथ SC समाज का भाई मेरे साथ बैठ करके एक कमरे में एक थाली में बैठकर खाना खाते हैं। भेदभाव पैदा करने का अगर किसी ने काम किया तो UGC के लोगों ने किया। हमारी लड़ाई केवल और केवल UGC के गाइडलाइन के लोगों से है।
कहा जा रहा है कि इक्वालिटी के लिए ये जो रेगुलेशन,
कहाँ इक्वालिटी खत्म हो गई ये बताइए। इस धरने में, इस आंदोलन में भी SC समाज के लोग आए थे, क्या वो हमारा समर्थन करने नहीं आए थे? वो हमारा हमसे प्यार करते, हमसे मोहब्बत करते। अगर मेरे बदन पे कपड़ा नहीं तो मैं उनसे मांग करके पहनने का काम करता हूँ। क्या ये समांतर व्यवहार नहीं है?
आपको क्या लगता है कि इसका मिसयूज हो सकता है?
बिल्कुल। अच्छा, मिसयूज ना होता, मैं आप लोकतंत्र की चौथी स्तंभ है। मैं पूर्व की घटना में आपको अवगत कराना चाहूंगा। विष्णु तिवारी नाम था, हमारे बड़े भाई थे, 20 साल उनको आजीवन कारावास हुआ था फर्जी SC ST मुकदमे में। क्या वो किसी माँ के पेट से पैदा हुए लाल नहीं थे? क्या वो देश के अंग नहीं थे? उनके दो भाई उनके सदमे में आके मौत हो गई उनकी। ये कानून अगर आ गया तो हम लोग तो जान ही रहे क्या दशा होगी।
हमारी मांग यही है कि लखनऊ
विश्वविद्यालय का common sentiment coming in from these very many of the campuses across the country. The idea of the regulations is to promote equality, but what the students are saying from the general category and otherwise from the other categories as well, that this eventually goes on and promotes inequality. Some activists, however, have also gone on to argue that these regulations are not robust enough to protect the SC, ST or the OBC students from the systemic discrimination during not just admissions but also the interview process. We'll see what happens about this story, but right now let's take a look at some more reactions that are coming in.
जिलाधिकारी महोदय जो बरेली हैं श्री अविनाश सिंह जी, उन्होंने वार्ता के लिए मुझे बुलाया। जो हमारे साथ सचिव साहब जो हैं बार एसोसिएशन बरेली के सचिव साहब दीपक पांडे जी भी थे, मेरे साथ में थे। इनको अलग कर दिया गया और बाहर बैठा दिया गया और मुझे अकेले डीएम साहब के साथ और कुछ अन्य साथी अधिकारीगण थे उनके साथ अकेले मैं बैठा वहाँ पे। मुझे कंटिन्यूस प्रलोभन दिया जा रहा था कि तुम एक काम करो 3-4 दिन।
And these are the visuals of the India-European Union trade pact that has just been signed. And you can see the visuals from inside the Hyderabad House, where all the key leaders, including Prime Minister Narendra Modi, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, present along with the EU chief Ursula von der Leyen, there at the Hyderabad House in the national capital as this very, very historic deal, the Indo-European Union deal has been announced. The formal fruition of the deal will be taking place after it gets the Parliament nod and the legal processes are complete. So it will take about 6 to 7 months, but possibly by the end of this year, this will come into fruition. The India-EU trade deal, nearly 2 decades of negotiations, and it's only now that India and the European Union are set to announce this historic trade deal at the 16th India-EU summit that's currently underway. And remember, this is being co-chaired by the President of the European Council, Antonio Luis Santos, and the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. They are presently on a state visit. They also, remember, attended the 77th Republic Day in the country. They were the chief guests at the ceremony, and this particular deal that one is looking at as these visuals continue to come in live will be bringing both the parties closer than ever together with active cooperation on not just trade but also security, clean energy transition and defense acquisition. All of this is something that one is looking at as far as the India-EU trade deal is concerned, the free trade agreement. We do know that this day today, as far as the India-EU summit is concerned, has concluded the long-running talks, the conversations on this landmark FTA that will not just cut tariffs, but it will go on to boost market access and also deepen the economic ties between the 27 European Union nations and India. My colleague Akanksha Sarup is now joining us on the broadcast from the Hyderabad House. Akanksha, even as these live visuals trickle in, we continue to speak about how historic this deal is. We're calling it the mother of all deals. This is what the EU chief has also said.
Right, and important to also, understand that we cannot look at this deal in isolation. Perhaps that is what makes it the mother of all trade deals, because it's happening at a time when the entire global economic climate is extremely divided, and you're talking at a time when Davos has just taken place. And at Davos, we saw how not just EU, primarily the NATO, but countries like India have all, in fact, stood up to countering the burden of the Trumpian tariffs, and which is what makes this deal extremely significant, given that it's also taken close to 19 years in the making. 2007 is when it was first struck as a BTAI. And more importantly, you're not just looking at trade, you're looking at defense and security, and you're looking at mobility partnership. All of these three are factors that actually make it the mother of all trade deals. And in fact, as we speak, I am currently at the Ananta Center, where you have the EU High Representative.
The EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs, that's going to be Ms. Kaya Kallas, will be making a media presence over here. She will also be making an address. It would be interesting to see how India and EU will now be looking towards forging strategic ties. But in this climate where we are seeing that there's in fact a diversification when it comes to our economic needs, when there's diversification diversifying of supply chains, also greater reliance on supply chains. You're looking towards exchange of defense technology, AI, increasing reliance on AI. It would be interesting to see what all EU and India can benefit from. You are also looking at this FTA bringing towards a lot of employment. You're looking towards the interest of the Indian farmers and MSMEs, which will also be protected. So these are all the factors that make it the mother of all trade deals. Because remember, that is exactly what the BTA, which with the United States, could not really guarantee India, which is the interest of our own Indian farmers. Something that the EU has made amply clear that they will not be threatening. That is the interest of our own farmers.
Absolutely. And Akanksha, do stay on with us. We also have Zaka Jacob, who's joining us live from the CNN News 18 newsroom. Zaka, there is one thing that this deal has taken years in the making, and the geopolitical shift has brought this about finally after nearly 2 decades. The economic enormous scale is one thing, the tariff cuts is the other, but we cannot help but notice the kind of reactions that one is getting from the United States of America, even before the deal was signed, in fact.
Yeah, look, no doubt about it. I think the appending of the global trade order that we've seen in the last 1 year since Trump came back to office has definitely been a factor, no doubt about it, in expediting the talks between India and the European Union. Just look at the timeline. They started these talks in 2007. The talks were suspended in 2013 because, both sides clearly were not on the same page. They had different ambitions and expectations from the deal. And for the next 7 or 8 years, there were virtually no talks on, taking forward this FTA between India and the EU. It's only after COVID in 2022 that they resumed the dialogue, much before Trump came back to office, because the world suddenly woke up and realized the over-dependence, the over-reliance of the entire supply chains when it comes to electronics manufacturing, critical technologies, was on one country, which was China. I mean, America realized this, Europe realized this, and they said, okay, we need to now look at China plus one. We need to reduce this over-reliance on just one country. So I think it's the post-COVID era that made countries around the world, middle powers like Europe, India, Canada, Mexico, etc., wake up and realize that we can't be so dependent for our critical minerals and for our supply chains on China. And China was also, not averse to weaponizing trade. Much before Trump weaponized trade with his tariffs, China was already weaponizing it with controlling rare earth supply chains. It did it with India with the control of rare earth magnets that are meant for electric vehicles and motors, etc. It did it with the United States as well. So I think that was one big factor. The other big factor, as you said, was definitely the tariffs that Trump has, used in the last 1 year. The inconclusive India-US FTA, which, negotiations are still going on. It's really at the desk of the President of the United States. It's up to him to give his final sign-off. But I think it sends out a signal that A, India is open for business. It's the fastest growing large economy in the world. This will create the biggest single market for trade of goods and merchandise. About 2 billion people between India and Europe. It's a 27-member bloc. So it gives access to Indian exporters, whether it's small-scale exporters like textiles and garments, footwear, leather, gems and jewelry. These are all sectors that have been affected and appended because of the Trump tariffs, and these are labor-intensive sectors as well. So places like Surat, Tirupur, Ludhiana, these will all benefit because the word is that the EU will reduce the bloc-wide tariffs on all of these labor-intensive sectors, whether it's textile, footwear, leather, etc., to zero. So that makes Indian exporters much more competitive across this 27-member bloc. And mind you, India is also sending out a signal that, look, this is the 9th FTA that India has signed in the last 4 years. And I go back to that fact that India also realized post-COVID how much it was dependent on certain countries when it comes to supply chains and certain countries when it comes to markets. So I think India is also sending out a signal. This is the 9th FTA in the last 4 years. It's got an FTA with the UAE, with New Zealand, with EFTA, and now this one, as Ursula von der Leyen said, is the mother of all deals because of the size, scale, and just the impact it's going to have both in Europe as well as here in India.
Yes, and a mutually beneficial deal for both the European Union and India. Of course, India being a large market for European goods as well. It's been one of those markets that hasn't been open to them so far. So they've been looking forward to this quite a bit. And India, of course, also wants newer markets, particularly with the climate prevailing with the US currently. Zaka, stay with us. Let me also quickly go back across to my colleague Akansha, who's at Hyderabad House. So just give me a sense. We're expecting the joint statement very soon, Akansha.
Right, we should be, and as we've also been discussing that now focus will shift on to ratifying this EU-India FTA, and you can expect that to happen very soon, but much of the paperwork will still be done. Word coming in from the External Affairs Ministry is that it could very much happen in Brussels now. So from New Delhi, you can expect focus to now be in Brussels, and perhaps by the time all of that paperwork actually translates on to ground zero, it's going to be 2027 beginning is what we are being told. And in fact, as I speak, I am at Ananta Center where the EU representative for Foreign Affairs, Ms. Kaya Kallas, is going to be arriving. So important to highlight that, as you rightly mentioned, that this is going to be opening up newer horizons for the Indian market, and important to also talk about how both EU and India are looking towards forging a reliable partnership, because reliability is exactly what has been lost, especially when it comes to these Trumpian tariffs. US was our largest bilateral trading partner, which has been replaced now by EU. You're also looking at mobility partnerships and pathways being opened up. Just to quote figures of 2024, the highest number of authorizations was for India.